Chapter 2795. A Pair of Eyes. Time passed without him realizing. The Yi Imperial Palace had been repaired, and the injured folks from the outer realm had recovered. But even so, the inside of the Yi Imperial Palace still seemed a bit heavy. The effect of the battle still had not scattered. The 5 great emperors had descended and killed with an undefeatable state. At that moment, everyone's eyes were taken over by despair. They would not be able to recover in a short time. As time passed, the cultivators of the Yi Imperial Palace were also improving continuously. They cultivated with even more effort, advancing themselves. Many people broke through the constraints of their planes. Yi Futian was still cultivating in isolation, and no one disturbed him. Even though Yu Sheng and Yi Qingyao had guarded him for a long time, they'd never disturbed his cultivation. That day, Yi Futian had broken through the shackles and blocked the attack from a former great emperor. Everyone had witnessed this. It meant that Yi Futian may have entered a new level, so naturally no one would disturb his cultivation at this time. In the cultivation court, divine light flowed across Yi Futian's body. This divine light was different from the power of the outside world. It belonged to himself. And within the world inside his body, the forces of yin and yang appeared in the turbid world of nothingness. The sun and moon began to rotate. At night, when the will of yin was the strongest, even a starry sky would appear. Other than that, the wills of the 5 elements were born too, appearing in this world. The growth of this world did not operate under Yi Futian's will. It seemed to have its own law. However, the birth of everything in this world was also related to Yi Futian's will. The core of this world was creation. After the wills of the 5 elements were born, this world now had mountain ranges and rivers. Flora also came into existence, and wind would blow across the space. After creating each element, Yi Futian's aura would also change a bit. The forces born here, due to fate, were the law of the world. The law of this world was his own power. It was the law of his own divine power, like Xinjia the Great, who could form a sky or sword with one word. Yi Futian had broken off the path, going from something to nothing. Now he was cultivating in reverse, going from nothing to something. He had been skilled in the elemental forces of the great path. Now he was creating it in his new world, and they were being born. In the snap of a finger, 1 year passed. During this year, the world inside Yi Futian's body had taken shape. Yin and yang combined, the sun and moon rotated, and both life and death appeared. The current life palace world had the general shape of a world, but it was still growing and completing itself. This day, the will of swordsmanship was born in one area of the world. It also transformed into a part of the world law. Thus, Yi Futian stopped his isolated cultivation. He came out without waiting for the world to continue developing. He vaguely felt that he could complete some things now. He did not want to wait longer. When Yi Futian's figure appeared above the Yi Imperial Palace, Hua Jiu came over. She could feel that Yi Futian was different from before, but she couldn't pinpoint how exactly he was different. The West Emperor's figure also appeared in the near distance, and he gazed at Yi Futian. He felt a bit threatened by Yi Futian right now. Even though Yi Futian did not release any aura, his natural sensitivity helped him sense danger. "Jiu, I'm going out," Yi Futian said to Hua Jiu. "Okay." Hua Jiu nodded. Naturally, she would not stop Yi Futian. "Senior, please help watch over the Yi Imperial Palace," Yi Futian said to the West Emperor. Seeing that face, he would think of Shi Qiyao, even though her temperament had changed greatly. "No problem." The West Emperor nodded, agreeing to it. Yi Futian bowed his head slightly, and then his figure floated forward. He vanished in a blink, heading out of the Yi Imperial Palace. The West Emperor looked at Yi Futian's backside, and a strange look appeared in his eyes. He had an idea of what Yi Futian was going to do. Yi Futian had not cultivated in isolation for too long right now. In fact, one could say this period had been very short. He could have continued to improve himself, but with Yi Futian's cultivation state right now, he seemed like he could not wait to do something. Of course, there was only one thing that Yi Futian wanted to do right now: take revenge. The God's Ruins continent was now connected to all the realms. Naturally, many passages led to the divine prefecture. After the world changed drastically, the space seemed to have changed too. He could not use that precious item anymore, but Yi Futian could still use those passageways to easily head towards the divine prefecture. The Vajra realm of the Vajra domain, divine prefecture, was a huge territory. The present Vajra realm was now one of the strongest places of the divine prefecture. The Vajra realm's ancient emperor had returned. The cultivators of the Vajra realm found pride in this. At this time, cultivators went to and fro in the Vajra realm. Many of them had very strong cultivations. They followed after the Vajra realm great emperor and were confident about the future. One day, the great emperor would return completely. But just then, a group of cultivators walking in the Vajra realm looked up into the sky. They saw a figure appear high up in the sky. This man had white robes and white hair. He was very handsome and had an indescribable temperament. He stood high in the sky and could attract everyone's gazes in an instant. It was like he did not belong to this world. He was an independent entity. This kind of temperament shocked them greatly. They had felt this from their ancient emperor's body. Who is that? Some people had never seen Yi Futian before. It's Yi Futian, a shocked voice said. Instantly, many people's expressions changed. Yi Futian had come murderously to the Vajra realm. In an instant, strands of strong aura exploded. Vajra divine power bloomed from their bodies. But the moment they released their auras of the great path, Yi Futian looked down at them. The next moment, they saw the most shocking scene since they started cultivating. Yi Futian's eyes were no longer like the eyes of a human. They saw the sun in his left eye and the moon in his right eye. Moonlight showered down. Instantly, their bodies were sealed by ice. Their consciousness had not been wiped entirely, and they tried to move, but they discovered that they'd already been sealed. The extreme coldness was the divine power of Yin. No, their hearts tremored. The next moment, the divine fire of the sun shot out of Yi Futian's other eye, shooting right onto the ice statues. The next instant, all of the ice statues disappeared from the world without a trace. It was like those cultivators had never come to the world before. The hearts of the people in the distance beat frantically. Was this still the power of a human cultivator? At that moment, a thought appeared in their minds. Divine power. Yi Futian had created his own divine power. Chapter 2790. 6. The Hopeless Vajra Realm. His eyes had turned into the sun and moon, the yin and yang. The current Yi Futian was like a true heavenly god. Run! Across the vast territory of the Vajra realm, countless people began fleeing instead of thinking of fighting. Since Yi Futian had already formed his own divine power, it meant that he was above them now. Even the former Yi Futian could have killed them as simply as flipping a hand, let alone the current Yi Futian. B/B. What could they do other than run? Probably no one other than the Vajra realm great emperor could handle Yi Futian. Seeing the cultivators of the Vajra realm escape, Yi Futian's body abruptly became large as a giant god, blocking the sky and sun. His pair of eyes also enlarged, shooting out the light of the sun and moon. It transformed into destructive power, and everything in its path turned to dust. Seeing the people in the distance, trying to escape, he opened his mouth wide and spat out divine thunder. In an instant, billions of bolts of divine lightning fell. Everything in its path was destroyed. Every cultivator that got hit was instantly killed and torn apart. They could not take a single hit. Has he already reached enlightenment and become a great emperor? Everyone was shocked inside. They felt despair and also bottomless panic. Yi Futian's eyes had turned into the sun and moon. He could spit out divine thunder, and he'd transformed into a giant. The Yi Futian that they saw was a god. One could not help but wonder if he had already reached enlightenment and stepped onto the path of the emperors. Yi Futian did not care about the guesses in their hearts. He stepped into the sky, and instantly a huge footprint was hurled down. He stepped onto the ground, and all the Vajra realm buildings collapsed. Many cultivators were stomped to death. The force of his foot was like a divine mountain falling, pressing down on the earth. He stepped across the sky, barging his way in, just like how the 5 ancient god clans had invaded the Yi imperial palace back then. He swept across, unbeatable. No one could stop him. There was only continuous death. The core fighters of the Vajra realm appeared, and they let out roars. Get the Great Emperor. Is the Great Emperor still cultivating in isolation? The shocked cries sounded in waves and carried fear. Even those who had cultivated to the top and even went through the divine tribulations of the Great Path, the cultivators who had once attacked the Yi imperial palace with the Vajra realm Great Emperor, now felt extremely strong terror. They could feel that Yi Futian, who had come for revenge this time, was undefeatable for them. He was an unmatchable heavenly god. Yi Futian's huge eyes looked down at the void in the distance. He had not arrived yet, but his eyes could already see into the depths of the Vajra realm. His eyes shot out the light of the sun and moon. Everything under his line of sight was turned instantly to dust. The top figures of the Vajra realm activated the force of the Great Path and formed the Vajra realm domain. It transformed into a boundless curtain of light that sealed off the space. They tried to stop Yi Futian's steps. But then they saw Yi Futian take a step. His giant foot stepped down on the curtain of light, and countless cracks appeared instantly. The curtain of light crumbled, but the big foot continued to step down. The Vajra realm cultivators tried to escape. Bang! With a huge sound, this foot that looked like a god's footprint stomped many top figures to death. They died in despair and could not fight back at all. "Where's the Great Emperor?" someone yelled. He could not care about being respectful anymore. The Vajra realm was facing the utmost disaster now. Back then, the Vajra realm Great Emperor had led the people to the Yi imperial palace, and now they were paying for it. The Great Emperor still had not appeared, and they could only keep dying. Right then, a beautiful beam of golden divine light shot out of a pagoda in the Vajra realm. It was extremely brilliant, illuminating the sky. The Vajra divine power surged and burst from it. It was extremely sharp. The Great Emperor is here. The Vajra realm cultivators finally saw a sliver of hope. At this moment of despair, the Vajra realm Great Emperor was their last bit of light. Now that the Great Emperor had appeared, it was like grabbing onto their last straw of hope. Bang! The frightening Vajra divine power transformed into a finger that stabbed through the pagoda. Like an indestructibly sharp blade, it shot towards Yi Futian. This finger was the finger of a heavenly god. Divine power tore through the sky. Even if Yi Futian got hit, his body would probably shatter too, right? Countless eyes were trained on that finger, hoping that it could kill Yi Futian or at least hurt him. The heavenly god that Yi Futian had transformed into stared at the incoming finger. He did not block it. The divine finger formed by the Vajra divine power blasted onto his huge body, emitting an incredible sound. It was like metal clashing. That's suicide. Many people stared at Yi Futian. He didn't block it. But the next moment, their pupils constricted. There were no eyes that weren't trained on that place, staring at Yi Futian's godly body. That godly body only shook a bit. It did not get penetrated and shattered just as everyone had imagined. This scene extinguished the shred of hope they had just had. Despair flooded their hearts again. The Vajra divine power's murder's finger could not break through Yi Futian's body. Had his current body already become a divine form. Yi Futian looked down, glancing at the strong cultivators of the Vajra realm below. With that gaze, the power of Een sealed everything. They could feel coldness coming from their souls. Then their bodies froze, their great path was sealed off, and they could no longer move. No! They raised their heads in despair and looked at Yi Futian. Some even started pleading to him. You have already entered the path. Why commit so much bloodshed? It was the great emperor who decided last time. We had no other choice. Now that the world had changed, their cultivations had all improved. The great emperor had returned too, so they all fantasized that they could continue advancing, especially because the Vajra realm had reached a new peak after their ancient emperor returned. But right at this time, despair descended. Yi Futian had come murderously, transformed into a heavenly god. The so-called ancient god clan could not take a single hit. All of their heritage had become so weak before the absolute strength. It was completely meaningless. Divine sunlight shot out of Yi Futian's left eye, landing on them directly. Under the divine powers of Yin and Yang, the core figures of the Vajra realm gradually emptied and finally turned to dust. The ashes scattered in the wind. Before this, the 5 ancient emperors had attacked the Yi imperial palace, making the cultivators in and out of the Yi imperial palace feel like ants under the great emperors. But today, Yi Futian made the strong cultivators of the Vajra realm feel the same thing. Despair, powerlessness. Facing Yi Futian, they were like ants that could be squashed to death. A single glance could turn them to dust. Bang! With a huge sound, the pagoda shattered. The Vajra realm great emperor's figure appeared. He stood in the distance, and his eyes were frightening as he stared at Yi Futian across the space. Failing to kill Yi Futian in the previous battle had left a lasting threat. He had not become a great emperor yet, but Yi Futian already had the abilities of a great emperor. His eyes had become the sun and moon. He spat out divine thunder, and his flesh body was indestructible. His body was like a true divine form. Every body part was made of divine power. Yi Futian's cultivation path was different from his. How did he do it? Chapter 2797 Battle of the Heavenly Gods. The Vajra realm great emperor did not care that much about the lives of Vajra realm cultivators. He was a great emperor from the ancient times and long stopped having feelings for his current descendants. Furthermore, everything and everyone below the great emperor plane were ants. For him, the cultivators of the Vajra realm were only ants who were closer to him. He had gone to cultivate in isolation after the last battle. Yi Futian's tribulation had given him a lot of pressure. What surprised him was that Yi Futian had come out after such a short time and was impatient about revenge. In his opinion, this was clearly unwise. Delaying your cultivation to take revenge for some ants was so stupid. Plus, Yi Futian's cultivation was significant now. He already had one step on the path of the emperors. He must be so foolish to do something like this. If it were him, he would choose to cultivate in isolation for life. In the distant era, the heavenly path controlled the world. The Vajra realm great emperor said to Yi Futian. Some followed the heavenly path. Some went against the heavenly path and broke it. They created a brilliant age of gods together. Unfortunately, the latter who broke the path wanted to change the heavens. The former also responded. At present, the world had changed drastically, and the great emperor's era has finally come. In this entirely new age, the gods have returned, and new emperors will rise. The cultivation world might welcome a new golden age and recover the prosperity of ancient times. You've already reached this step now. It means you ride above all else and may become one of the stars of the future. Since you're already at this position, how about you stop now? The Vajra realm great emperor wanted a truce. Below him, the countless cultivators of the Vajra realm looked at their great emperor and had an indescribable feeling in their hearts. Shouldn't the Vajra realm great emperor act like a great emperor and kill Yi Futian to avenge the Vajra realm cultivators? Even they could see that the Vajra realm great emperor felt unconfident. That was why he was asking for a truce. With the great emperor's personality, he would not be asking for peace and truce at this time if he was confident in killing Yi Futian. Yi Futian had killed his way into here. The high and mighty emperor, Yi Futian, said mockingly and caused an echo. Even the cultivators of the Vajra realm could see the truth, so he naturally could see that the lord of the Vajra realm was intimidated. You didn't act like this before. Please keep reading on MYB0XN0 VL0TC0M. His voice filled the space and produced an echo with the world. At the same time, frightening divine light flowed across his body, forming the great path. The divine light of the sun and moon shot directly out of his eyes, going toward the lord of the Vajra realm. Did the possibility for truce exist between them? A sheet of light formed by Vajra divine power rose around the Vajra realm great emperor's body. Light from dazzling runes flowed across the light sheet, and divine power circulated throughout. It was indestructible. He was indeed a bit intimidated by Yi Futian. He had broken his path and even succeeded. In that era, far fewer great emperors had gone against the great path rather than following it. They had a higher death rate, and they might not be stronger than those who followed the great path. However, the supernatural beings who could stand at the peak were usually from that group. They broke the great path and created their own path. In the current age, the great path had collapsed, and the path of the emperors was broken, yet Yi Futian had successfully broken his path. His body was now a divine form, his flesh was the path, his eyes had turned into the sun-moon, and he spat out divine thunder. Yi Futian would be extraordinary, even in that ancient age. The divine light of the sun and moon fell upon the Vajra realm light curtain. The powers of yin and yang instantly covered that domain. The defensive curtain was getting eaten away at, but the defenses formed by divine power did not shatter directly. After all, he was a former great emperor. Below, the cultivators of the Vajra realm all looked up at the battle in the sky. This battle would determine their fates. Yi Futian opened his mouth, and his divine form spat out divine thunder. It transformed into the force of divine punishment, hitting the curtain of light squarely. A crack appeared in the Vajra divine power. The yin and yang had already been eating away at the defenses. After the divine thunder landed, the light curtain fell apart instantly. The destructive attack continued advancing, going murderously towards the Vajra realm great emperor. But at that time, a frightening beam of divine light shot out of his eyes. In that instant, many divine monuments appeared in the sky. It was like the Vajra divine power had formed divine monuments that shielded before him, high up in the sky or across the world. They were everywhere. They had not unleashed their strongest abilities in the battle against the Yi imperial palace. "Go," he uttered in a cold voice. Instantly, the divine monuments everywhere went towards Yi Futian's body from all directions. They were fast as lightning. The divine power monuments were about to transform into a Vajra realm cell to imprison Yi Futian. A muffled sound came from the dome of the sky. Countless people looked up at the sky and gazed at that shocking scene. Every divine monument was humongous. They joined from 8 directions, and even the yin, yang, and divine thunder couldn't destroy them in an instant. If the divine monuments closed in, it would form a world prison. Yi Futian scanned them with his eyes. Instead of dodging them, he stepped into the sky. The world roared and transformed into a heavenly god. He crashed straight into the divine monument before him. Boom! There was a terrifying boom, as if the world was splitting apart. The huge divine monument before Yi Futian shattered from Yi Futian's divine form, crashing into it. The divine monument still came for him from different directions. A huge golden staff appeared in Yi Futian's hand. It had been formed by the divine power in his body. Wham! The golden divine staff twirled, and staff silhouettes swept across the sky. Bam, bam, bam. All of the monuments constructed by Vajra divine power were blasted apart. They couldn't fend off the attack of a divine form. But right then, an even more prominent figure of a golden, heavenly god appeared before Yi Futian. It was the Vajra realm Great Emperor's transformation. Divine light flowed across that huge body, and the Vajra divine power was pushed to the max. Supreme might covered the vast land, causing the people below to fall to the ground. Was this a true heavenly god? Yi Futian, you and I will both become emperors. Must we determine who will die or live today? The Vajra realm divine lord's gaze swept towards Yi Futian. His voice was thick and powerful, echoing throughout the dome of the sky. It was only a voice, but many of the top cultivators below were shaken up. Blood seeped from their eardrums. The light formed by the Vajra divine power radiated in the sky and also shone on Yi Futian's body. It emanated a very sharp aura. However, he was completely unmoved. His eyes continued shooting at the other like the sun and moon, and his body continued to enlarge. He kept growing, making the hearts of the cultivators below pound heavily. "It's you who will die," Yi Futian uttered coldly. This battle was not to determine who would die or live. It was to make the other die. Arrogant. When the Vajra realm great emperor spoke, countless beams of divine light shot out. The Vajra divine power transformed into billions of golden spears that dove towards Yi Futian. Yi Futian's eyes shone with divine light. Moonlight showered down, and under the power of Yin, time and space seemed to come to a standstill. Frost covered the endless golden spears, and their speed slowed down. At the same time, Yi Futian attacked again. There was a huge divine sword materializing in his hand. Chapter 2798 Destruction. Yi Futian had transformed into a heavenly god. He held the divine sword, and moonlight showered down. The divine power of Yin sealed the vast space. The golden spears formed by the Vajra divine power were all covered in frost, and their speed was affected too. Yi Futian took a step forward and instantly stabbed the boundless divine sword out. The entire world seemed to fall apart abruptly. The space was about to be torn apart. All of the Vajra divine power spears in the divine sword's path broke apart. Under the divine power of Yin, these spears seemed to have weakened a lot. The Vajra realm great power used his mind, and golden divine light instantly enveloped the vast space. This area had become the Vajra realm. Countless beams of golden light shone onto his body. He reached out a huge hand, and the light filling the sky landed on his fingers. The next moment he pointed, attacking Yi Futian's incoming divine sword. The Tianqian's point. Countless eyes watched the shocking scene in the dome of the sky. The two huge gods were like gods of war. Even though they hadn't fully broken into the Emperor realm, the battle before their eyes were like an actual war between gods. With that finger, the world grew colorless. Golden divine light shone through vast land, and the space in its path was destroyed. That finger seemed to want to divide the world into two. The sky was halved. At his peak, the single point of the Vajra realm great emperor could penetrate an entire continent. Two extremely frightening attacks zoomed through the sky and then converged. They crashed together. Instantly, the space was almost torn apart. A destructive windstorm swept across the land. This attack was like a competition between their divine powers. There was a muffled sound. The Tianqian's point formed by Vajra divine power was crumbling. The divine power collapsed, making the observing cultivators' hearts beat furiously. Was he about to lose? The Vajra realm great emperor's pupils constricted. Yi Futian stood on the world, and his eyes shone with divine light that covered the Vajra realm great emperor's body. He wanted to seal the heavenly god's figure with ice. At the same time, his arms continued forward. The divine sword killed its way over and shattered the tension's point. Countless beams of divine light burst from the Vajra realm great emperor's body and blocked the divine power of Een. At the same time, he put his hands together. His palms formed a sealed space of divine power and snatched the divine sword. But then his arms and palms were invaded by the divine power of Een. The power of Een could weaken the sturdiest thing in the world. Thus, even Vajra divine power was significantly weakened under the power of Een. There was a huge boom, and the divine sword stabbed through the palm fiercely. It continued forward along the heavenly arm, continuing to shatter it. The Vajra realm great emperor's expression changed drastically. He'd actually lost. Boom! Taking a step in the air, his body shot towards the higher altitude. But how could Yi Futian give him that chance? Even though the divine power of Een could not seal him directly, it still affected his speed. At the same time, Yi Futian's speed increased. That extremely huge divine figure moved like the wind. The current Yi Futian himself was created by the path. He had constructed his own world. He could be the sun, could be the moon, could be thunder and lightning, and could be the wind. Poof, poof! There were sharp noises. The Vajra realm great emperor transformed into the divine light and shot into the air. However, Yi Futian carried the divine sword and charged towards the other, stabbing his arm through. Then he attacked directly onto the heavenly god's body. Bang! There was a low sound, and the divine body shook violently. Then Een, Yang, and thunder rained down at once. The Vajra divine power could not protect his body, and the divine sword stabbed through it, breaking into it and directly penetrating the huge divine body. Paired with the huge sound, the heavenly god's body broke apart. Just then, countless beams of divine light shot out simultaneously towards different directions. Some divine light even shot towards Yi Futian's eyes. Yi Futian did not hide from it at all. The sun and moon were reflected in his huge eyes, and he spat out lightning. The horrifying divine power shrouded the sky, sealing it off. Instantly, the divine light shooting in all directions was blocked too. You still want to escape? His cold voice resounded through the void. His eyes swept across the space. The huge body of the heavenly god was shattering like crazy, disappearing continuously. All of the divine light that tried to escape were blocked and destroyed by the divine powers of Een and Yang. Yi Futian, countless voices said. It was the Vajra realm great emperor's voice that came from different directions. The divine light seemed to contain his consciousness. You and I both cultivated to this point. Why must you eradicate me? If you need help, I'll do anything you ask. If you want to improve, I can give you advice too. The voice sounded a bit panicked. It was clear that the Vajra realm great emperor was scared. He had survived for countless years and was finally reborn now. He had waited for countless years but would die here today. You're not qualified. Yi Futian's baritone voice sounded throughout the sky. His divine power continued sweeping across, killing every remnant of consciousness. He didn't let any shred of aura go and wiped it all out. Yi Futian, it was a panicked roar. A silhouette of the Vajra realm great emperor appeared, but Yi Futian did not care. His eyes swept across, and the divine light of the sun burned it directly, not showing any mercy. This sweeping lasted for a very long time. Yi Futian did not give the other any chance at all. He destroyed that place completely until everything had turned to dust and not a single crumb of the Vajra realm great emperor was left. The other had existed from ancient times until now. How could he give the other a chance to come again? The people below kept staring up at the sky, and their hearts pounded furiously. They had witnessed Yi Futian eradicate the Vajra realm great emperor with their own eyes. This terrified them. He was too cruel, going to the extreme and not giving the other a sliver of hope. A returned great emperor who had not fully recovered to their peak had died here, killed by Yi Futian. The Vajra realm great emperor was the first to live until now and yet get killed. After killing the Vajra realm great emperor, Yi Futian's gaze swept down. Terrifying divine light shot out of his eyes, covering the entire vast Vajra realm. In an instant, the Vajra realm turned to dust under the divine fire of the sun. Everything was turned to ash and ceased to exist. From now on, the Vajra realm of the ancient god clan had become history. Yet another of the 6 ancient god clans of the divine prefecture had turned to dust. And compared to Tianyan City, the Vajra realm's destruction was even more complete. It had been reduced to ashes. After completing all this, Yi Futian's figure flashed and disappeared. Countless eyes watched him leave. Their hearts were still pounding. Was Yi Futian going for the next ancient god clan? There had been 5 ancient god clans that participated in the battle at the Yi Imperial Palace. Chapter 2799 prepared ahead. The second ancient god clan that Yi Futian visited was the Haotian clan. Haotian clan was located in the Nantian domain, which was different from the Vajra region. However, with Yi Futian's cultivation nowadays, it didn't take long for him to traverse large expanses of territories. As the ancient power of the ancient god clans that resided in the divine prefecture, Haotian clan in Nantian domain had countless years of history and wielded unparalleled influence in Nantian domain. The main city where the Haotian clan was located was also known as the premier city in Nantian domain. What happened? At this time, many people in the city were talking about it. Not long ago, there was a lot of commotion inside the Haotian clan about gathering the cultivators inside the clan. Then news came out that the cultivators of the Haotian clan were evacuating. No idea what's going on. It looks like they are preparing to face a major enemy. But what kind of enemy can threaten the Haotian clan? Someone responded, currently the Haotian clan was under the command of Haotian the Great, who could instill such fear in them. Perhaps it's because of God's continent, someone said. Everyone knew about God's continent by now, and many top cultivators had gone there to cultivate, shuttling between the divine prefecture and the God's continent. They all knew there were too many terrifying cultivators at that place. I heard that a major war had broken out on the God's continent previously, and 5 of the ancient god clans had joined forces to attack Yi Futian and almost managed to kill him too. However, after that war, Yi Futian survived the divine tribulation, and he may have undergone a certain transformation after that. Do you think it might be him? Ask someone who had heard about that battle. I've also heard about it. That might be the case. There was a lot of information going around inside the city, and everything stemmed from the recent changes taking place in Haotian clan, which attracted many people's interest. Just as all the cultivators in the city were talking and guessing, high above the sky, a figure traveled through the air and came to this main city, heading straight to the place where the Haotian clan was located. Some cultivators traveling in the air saw Yi Futian and couldn't help but show a look of surprise. Many people had shuttled past him from below. That's odd. Someone turned around and looked that way. Then their eyes sharpened, fixed on that speeding figure. It's Yi Futian, someone exclaimed. He's here in Haotian City. What is he going to? When they thought of the previous changes in Haotian clan, they all realized something and began turning around and walking the other way. Soon, a special kind of news began spreading inside Haotian City. The changes that took place in the Haotian clan were because of Yi Futian, who had come to slaughter them. This news was quickly causing a great sensation, spreading at lightning speed. Countless cultivators rushed in the direction of the Haotian clan. It seemed that the Haotian clan of today was indeed very fearful of Yi Futian. At the same time the news had spread, Yi Futian had already arrived in Haotian clan. Looking at the ancient god clan that towered into the sky before him, Yi Futian's eyes were cold and indifferent. He looked at the gigantic Futian divine monument in the area below, and suddenly the monument was shrouded in the power of Yin. It disintegrated into a pile of dust. In the distance, the hearts of those outside of the Futian clan trembled violently when they beheld this scene. Someone had destroyed the divine monument of the Futian clan. An even more shocking scene appeared in the next moment. Several horrific auras descended upon the space, right inside the Futian clan. Futian did not seem surprised and acted as he normally would. Many years ago, when he and the 6 ancient god clans had first had their grievances, these 6 ancient god clans had allied and exchanged information. He had destroyed the Vajra region and slain their great emperor. How could the other ancient god clans not know about such major news? Moreover, they knew his target, so they had rushed over here. Among the 6 ancient god clans, Tianyan City and the Vajra region had both been destroyed. Now, there were only 4 other ancient god clans remaining. It was unsurprising that they would join forces, especially now that Futian had killed the great emperor of the Vajra region. The 4 great emperors appeared in different positions, and from them, for terrifying auras suppressed this space, shocking the cultivators from the distance of Futian City to no ends. It turned out that the changes inside Futian clan were because of Futian. To deal with him, the great emperors of the 4 ancient god clans showed up here simultaneously. Was today's Futian so scary? These 4 great emperors from the ancient times surged with divine power, and there was no longer the contempt they once had in their eyes when they invaded inside imperial palace. There was more of wariness in their eyes now, because, after all, one of them had already died by Futian's hands. Futian glanced at the 4 great emperors and did not speak. The powerful divine light surged upon his body as he then held up both of his hands. Suddenly, massive stars appeared and completely covered the sky. The people who were watching the battle from afar looked horrified as the sky above their heads dimmed. The cultivators from Futian City were trembling with fear. Then they saw Futian's hands fell down. In an instant, the stars suspended in the sky above the Futian clan fell towards the ground below to bury the Futian clan completely, thus sending it into history. Futian the Great's face changed slightly as he suddenly released a supreme power. Instantly, a divine force manifested to support this corner of the sky. Boom, boom, boom. Terrifying loud sounds were heard as the gigantic and boundless heavenly bodies fell down. However, they were blocked by the divine power of Futian and hung in midair. Futian's eyes glanced that way, and his eyes turned into the sun and the moon. The shadow and solar divine powers shot directly at Futian the Great. Futian the Great raised both hands, abruptly slapped towards the sky above, blasting out the divine seal of Futian. Suddenly, the stars right above them exploded and shattered. Futian the Great slammed his palms forward again, turning it into a divine wall, blocking off the invading shadow and solar divine powers. The other 3 great emperors resisted the stars falling from the firmament. They would either try to prop them up or directly attack with divine power to smash them. Futian turned his eyes and swept towards the Futian clan below. The divine fire of the sun came down, and in just an instant, the vast Futian clan below was ignited by the divine flames, which turned into ashes right away. Different places continued to burn, and in just a short moment, the divine fire of the sun had covered the entire Futian clan. Fortunately, the cultivators of Futian clan have already evacuated. Many cultivators from Futian City secretly marveled. The truth was that they could not have stopped Futian. As soon as the divine fire of the sun descended, any cultivators in the vicinity were killed. But though its people had left, Futian clan was no more, as it was burned to the ground. Futian. At this moment, a strong voice came from above the sky. It was as if it had penetrated through the void. Then rays of divine light descended from the sky, like space passages piercing the void. The golden divine light descended, and some people came walking out of the golden passageway. Everyone had an astonishing aura, which was beyond terrifying. Many cultivators in Futian city closed their eyes. The divine light was simply too blinding. Futian's eyes fixed on the other side, watching those cultivators descending. He saw several familiar faces, like the princess of the divine prefecture, Donghuang Diyuan. Beside him was Li Daoshou, who was known as the strongest person in Donghuang Imperial Palace in the divine prefecture. However, this time, none of the people who came out of the golden passageways were weaker than Li Daoshou. These were people who might be the hidden source of power in Donghuang Imperial Palace. Futian didn't feel that it was anything strange. Such a group of cultivators had existed in the human realm, so it was not that surprising that the same might be true of the divine prefecture. Once Donghuang the Great had unified the divine prefecture, there would be old monster-level figures who submitted under his command and cultivated under him. Donghuang Imperial Palace has arrived. The cultivators in Futian City secretly marveled that Futian's strength had alarmed even Donghuang Imperial Palace. Chapter 2800 Submit. Donghuang Diyuan glanced in Futian's direction. Not the slightest emotion could be seen in her eyes, except coldness. She didn't speak, but merely turned her attention to Futian the Great and the other 3 great emperors. She said, "Will the 4 ancient god clans submit to Donghuang Imperial Palace?" What? Everyone in Futian City looked surprised. What did Donghuang Diyuan mean by this? Was she asking the 4 great emperors from the 4 ancient god clans whether they would submit to her, Donghuang Diyuan? Or was she asking if the 4 ancient god clans would obey the orders and the commands of Donghuang Imperial Palace? They didn't understand, but the 4 great emperors understood, and Futian, too, understood. He had guessed before that the 5 great emperors of the 5 ancient god clans may have gone to the human realm to cultivate, but the human ancestor wanted to stage a double cross. More importantly, the divine prefecture had no jurisdiction over them, so that it couldn't do anything about it. After all, the ancient god clans were only residing in the territories belonging to the divine prefecture. Still, they were not forces under the command of Donghuang Imperial Palace then. Donghuang the Great was not in a position to force them to do anything, or else he would have gone against his own will and became the same as the Dark World. However, this time they were threatened by Futian, and it was at a time like this that Donghuang Diyuan asked this crucial question. They could say they would not submit, but Donghuang Diyuan and the forces belonging to Donghuang Imperial Palace could stand by and watch. If they answered yes to the question, from now on, they would be under the rule of Donghuang the Great, who would also command them. Above the firmament, the divine light was shining brilliantly. Those extremely splendid spatial passageways were still there, and Donghuang Diyuan was even more magnificent than she was once upon a time. One question from her is to ask the 4 great emperors to choose. The 4 great emperors did not make a reply. If they agreed, it would be the same as obeying Donghuang Imperial Palace. Then, if any of them dared to be a traitor, Donghuang the Great could intervene to execute them, and they would have nothing to say for themselves, not even the human ancestor. The operation of this world still followed some basic principles, unless someone had the absolute power to break them. Futian understood that Donghuang Diyuan had her ideas about things as well. His figure grew greater, turning into a god from heaven again. He stretched out his hands as a massive divine rod appeared in it. This rod was golden in color and seemed to be engraved with the brilliance of the stars. Even if it simply fell by itself, it was enough to crush everything under the sky. Buzz! Futian's body moved forward, and that godlike torso was making its way along with a divine rod in his hand, shooting straight towards Futian the Great. Futian the Great's gaze sharpened. He saw Futian's speed increase, and a body of God directly rushed at him as the divine rod came smashing down. That gigantic and massive divine rod danced in Yi Futian's hand as if it was extremely light and nimble. However, when it blasted out, a sound of the sonic boom could be heard throughout the void, as if the space was exploding and that the heaven and the earth were about to be pulverized. The cultivators standing in the faraway Futian city felt a heavy pressure when they saw the swings of the rod. Futian the Great raised his hand and reached out. Suddenly, a terrifying Futian divine power was held within his palm. A massive divine imprint blasted out, like a blow from the heaven itself, which was equally ponderous. When these two horrific attacks collided, the sky and earth crumbled, and the void was thoroughly shaken. A destructive storm swept out, and numerous cracks appeared upon the Futian divine seal, as it then began to shatter. It was being blasted apart by the gigantic divine rod as the terrifying storm continued to exert its coercion. Futian the Great was feeling a mighty pressure at this moment/B. Yi Futian's attack was enough to crush his divine power. But when Yi Futian attacked Futian the Great, the other three great emperors also took action. Heavenly Emperor Jiang held the golden divine halberd and turned it into a beam of light. The destructive divine halberd broke through the void and descended, attacking Yi Futian's body of a god. At this time, Yi Futian's body was humongous, which meant he was also a massive target. When this devastating blow found its target, it would probably pierce through his flesh. Wuliang the Great unleashed countless divine swords, as Yuanshi the Great mobilized the power of god punishment somewhere over Yi Futian. In an instant, attacks of mass destruction directly submerged that corner of heaven and earth, ready to bury Yi Futian in those destructive attacks. Boom! Yi Futian's body erupted with an incomparable aura. Having morphed into a deity, every hair on his head had stood up and turned into a sharp sword to resist the onslaught of god-punishing power. His skin turned into the hardest rock in the world as millions of divine swords and divine halberds landed upon it, but failed to break open his body. When Yi Futian took that step, his body was no longer a mortal body of flesh and blood. It was a body of a deity, real divine body. Unparalleled rays of light erupted from that body, as the divine power of Yin froze those millions of divine swords and halberds instantly. Yi Futian's body as a deity danced with the divine rod, accompanied by loud rumbling sounds. Heaven and earth roared, and countless attacks exploded and shattered. The sky was filled with the shadows of the rod strikes, as these strikes smashed at the four great emperors simultaneously. The four great emperors released their attacks at the same time to defend themselves. The shadows of the rod covered the entire sky, and each strike contained supreme divine power that was enough to smash the void and shatter the firmament. At the same time, the divine glory of shadow/solar sprinkled down and covered the boundless space, but it targeted Futian the Great in particular. Yi Futian was going to deal with one person at a time and get rid of them one by one. The cultivators in Futian City were shocked when they witnessed this battle. An invincible flesh. Not only did Yi Futian's eyes turn into the sun and the moon, with thunders spat out of his mouth, his hair had also turned into sharp swords, and his skin turned into stars and rocks. What kind of monster was this? Aside from the cultivators from Futian City, even the cultivators from the Donghuang Imperial Palace were trembling in their hearts when they saw Yi Futian at this moment. Today's Yi Futian was far too strong, as if he was a god descending upon this world. His power was enough to uproot the mountains with a peerless dominance of someone who could not be defeated. Bang! A loud noise came out, and Futian the Great was blasted into flying out. With a grunt, he could feel his internal organs were shaking. He raised his head to stare at Yi Futian. When those infinite strikes of the rods came down, he felt as if endless stars had fallen, and that corner of the sky came clapping down, containing an unparalleled power. It was a power that even Futian divine power could not withstand. How could such a monster be created? With a flicker of his form, he flew higher into the sky. With a thought, the vast world became his world. His figure disappeared as he merged into this world, turned to part of the vast sky, and became one with it. An overwhelming pressure descended and landed squarely on Futian. Futian glanced at this corner of the sky with contempt, as the sun and the moon hovered above, and the divine power of shadow and solar shrouded this space. Immediately, the space was covered with frost, yet still burning with the sacred flames, followed by the divine thunders, as one attack after another was unleashed continuously. The divine rod in Futian's hand waved again, ready to attack. However, the vast heaven disappeared at this moment, and Futian the Great retreated into the distance. He didn't dare to continue his transformation as the vast heaven, as it was only a matter of time before it was going to be smashed by Futian. Futian clan is willing to submit under the jurisdiction of Donghuang Imperial Palace. Futian the Great raised his head and said to Donghuang Diyuan in the sky. He finally admitted defeat. Chapter 28, A One Deep Meaning. Futian the Great had compromised and bowed his head, surrendering himself to Donghuang Imperial Palace. As soon as the statement was made, it meant that from this moment forward, the Futian clan was under the jurisdiction of Donghuang Imperial Palace, giving Donghuang Imperial Palace the right over Futian clan and Futian the Great. The cultivators in Futian City looked at that godlike figure. They thought they could have never predicted that one battle with Futian would result in Futian the Great submitting to Donghuang Imperial Palace. Futian the Great was extremely wary of Futian. Did this mean that the great emperors who had once attacked Futian in his territory were now no longer able to contend with him? That legendary young man had defeated the mighty existences from ancient times. Futian frowned slightly. He understood that Donghuang Diyuan wanted to force the four great emperors to surrender, but was it enough to stop him? He was a little reluctant, even if this was their territory. The sky was full of the waving shadows of the rod, as Futian never ceased to attack. He slaughtered in the direction of Futian the Great, but at this moment an extremely radiant divine light descended from the sky. A tyrannical storm of divine power overwhelmed the area where he was. In this storm, all the powers of the Great Path were imprisoned, as if there could not be the existence of any other rule's power. Futian's power of shadow/solar was being obstructed, and the strikes of the rod were becoming slower. He raised his head to look at Donghuang Diyuan, only to see rays of beaming light falling from her. Those rays of light were from the revelation, divine power. This time, Donghuang Diyuan seemed to have transformed into an empress, stronger than she ever was before. Obviously, she had not squandered all these years, either, because she had undergone a great transformation. Boom! Futian stepped forcefully forward. Even though the revelation, divine power, was extraordinary, it could not definitively limit Futian in any way. So, he continued to move forward, and the attacks of destruction did not stop. When Donghuang Diyuan saw this, she released the revelation divine power to its extreme. At the same time, all around Donghuang Diyuan, divine power surged upon the top cultivators from the divine prefecture, and they were descending in Futian's direction. Futian, my father didn't kill you because of the past, but it doesn't mean that you can act with such insolence in the land of the divine prefecture. Donghuang Diyuan chided him coldly, and her voice resounded throughout the void. When her voice faded, a top cultivator next to her walked out with imperial arms in hand. It was a boundless and massive god-silencing bell, from which a terrifying divine power permeated. Especially under the urging of this man's divine power, the might of the imperial arms was incredibly awesome. Boom! Shocking sounds came out, and the god-silencing bell shot out rounds after rounds of divine light, and each round of divine light turned into a vast divine bell to smash down upon Futian, wanting to bury him. Yi Futian raised his head and glanced at them. Then the divine power of Yin was unleashed. Shadows of the bells that descended from the void were blocked by ice, making it difficult to continue its forward momentum. Then the imperial arms descended, carrying the supreme divine might to aim for the kill. Its power covered a vast space, intending to bury Yi Futian once and for all. The divine rod swung by Yi Futian slashed upward into the sky above, and the shadows of the rod filled the sky. The clanging sounds were deafening as the rod in Yi Futian's hand flew out. It grew continuously and became more extraordinary until it blasted inside the god-silencing bell. Clang! A terrifying sound came out, and an unparalleled storm of destruction erupted from the god-silencing bell. The imperial arms were repelled and knocked out. Likewise, the divine rod had also returned to Yi Futian's hands. Under joint attacks, Yi Futian's attack on Haoqian the Great was thwarted. The three of you make a choice. If you don't want to surrender, Donghuang Imperial Palace will not force you to. Feel free to make your own decisions, Donghuang Diyuan said. Her voice rang throughout the void. She was talking to Yuanshi the Great, Wuliang the Great, and Heavenly Emperor Jiang. Heavenly Emperor Jiang and the others stared at Yi Futian. The truth was that he could have left when Yi Futian was battling just now. All he needed to do was open a spatial door with his extraordinary strength, and he could have left, but he didn't. Even if he left, what else could he do? He wouldn't be able to gain a foothold in the divine prefecture, and he would be hunted by Yi Futian forever, or to seek refuge in the human realm. The human ancestor meant to buy their loyalty and make them submit to him, but it wasn't so easy. It was said that Donghuang the Great was a peerless figure in this era. He was also the person who cut through the path before Yi Futian to become an emperor. In ancient times, Donghuang the Great would be a super cultivator who went against the natural order of the world. Therefore, he would like to learn something from Donghuang the Great. I would be willing to enter Donghuang Imperial Palace, Heavenly Emperor Jiang said, and his answer was very decisive. The world was unpredictable. There was no friendship in this world, only self-interest. For them, everything had only one purpose, and that was to prove the way again and set foot on the thrones they had held in years past. Everything could be sacrificed for this purpose. How could the other two not understand Heavenly Emperor Jiang's thinking? Yuanshi the Great was heard saying, I have always admired Donghuang the Great, and I have always wanted to request an audience. I am willing as well, Wuliang the Great said also. The four great emperors expressed their positions one after another. They were great emperors returning to the ancient god clans. They had allied because their goal was the same, so it helped to keep the same position as allies, which would be suitable for them in the end. After all, this was not their era anymore, and they should make the best of it for the time being. Everything else could wait when they reached the imperial realm. Donghuang Diyuan glanced at the ancient emperors below, and her expression was still icy cold. Then her eyes drifted once again to Yi Futian and said, You can go. And if you come back again in the divine prefecture, it will not be like this time. Yi Futian stared at the Donghuang Diyuan. Even though numerous cultivators were in front of him, he didn't think he could be defeated. Nowadays, his defense was nearly invincible, and hardly anyone under the great emperors could touch him. Even these few ancient emperors could not have done so. Nevertheless, this was the divine prefecture, the territory of Donghuang the Great. Since Donghuang Diyuan had arrived, and Donghuang Imperial Palace got itself involved, this meant that there was not much hope for now. This time he was destined not to be able to kill the remaining great emperors. The sun and the moon disappeared from his eyes, but Yi Futian looked as calm as could be. With a smile, he looked at Donghuang Diyuan and said, The princess is even more beautiful after such a long absence. If there is ever an opportunity, I would like to catch up with the princess alone. He turned around and stepped into the void in a single step. Dong Huang Diuen's beautiful eyes stared at Yi Futian's departing figure, and no one could fathom what she was thinking. The others, however, could not be certain if there were any deep meanings behind Yi Futian's parting words. The Vajra region has been destroyed, and from now on, if there is no order from Dong Huang Imperial Palace, please don't move around at will. Dong Huang Diuen cast a final glance at the few men in the area below before leading her people back to the golden passageway. Heavenly Emperor Jiang and the others frowned, showing a look of puzzlement. Dong Huang the Great did not plan on summoning them. What was the meaning of this? They thought Dong Huang the Great would ask Dong Huang Diuen to take them to Dong Huang Imperial Palace. Chapter 2802 Path of the Emperors. After Yi Futian returned to Yi Imperial Palace, he continued cultivating in retreat. He had only managed to destroy the Vajra region out of the 5 ancient god clans on this outing. For now, he was unable to extinguish the other 4 ancient god clans like he wanted to. However, once he was able to step onto the Path of Emperors, it would only be a matter of time before he got rid of them. The evolution of the world inside his body was far from completion. In addition, the elemental powers that he created were also in their most rudimentary form, which meant that his strength had not yet reached its peak. He could combine the elemental powers to create an even stronger rule power, which the outside world called divine power. Still, no one disturbed Yi Futian's cultivation. Everyone in Yi Imperial Palace knew that Yi Futian was at a crucial point at this very moment. Soon after, news spread from the Divine Prefecture to the continent of ruins and eventually made its way inside Yi Imperial Palace. The news was that Yi Futian had slayed the great emperor of the Vajra region and destroyed the Vajra region single-handedly. He had even gone to Haotian clan for the express purpose of erasing the Haotian clan's base. It was only when he battled the 4 ancient emperors that Dong Huang Imperial Palace intervened, and Yi Futian was forced to back off. After the news of this battle came out, countless cultivators on God's continent were shocked beyond words. Could Yi Futian already have the ability to kill someone like the ancient emperors? Although those great emperors had not yet returned to their former glory, they were, after all, great emperors themselves once. Had Yi Futian crossed the divine realm in that battle and broke the shackles? Had he already embarked on the Path of Emperors? There was news from the Divine Prefecture that today's Yi Futian was akin to a great emperor himself. Like a deity, his eyes could be turned into the sun and the moon, and his mouth could spit out thunders. One step of his foot was like a mountain that came down for the kill, and his skin was as indestructible as stars and rocks. His physical body had been enlightened and became a veritable divine body. Even the powerful great emperors from ancient times could not sack their defenses. After the news spread, there were many more exaggerated rumors. It was said that Yi Futian now had 3 heads and 6 arms, and he was already on the path of the emperors and would soon become an emperor himself. The cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace were a little speechless regarding these rumors that began circling, but they were also full of expectations for Yi Futian. He had gone to kill the great emperor of the Vajra region by himself in the Divine Prefecture. Just where in his cultivation had he progressed to now? Everyone was looking forward to when Yi Futian would come out of retreat again. How far was he from becoming a great emperor? No one disturbed Yi Futian's cultivation, and the people in Yi Imperial Palace were also working very hard. None of them wanted to fall too far behind. One after another, more and more cultivators began to emerge. However, Yi Futian was unaware of all the changes that took place in the outside world, but continued to immerse himself in his cultivation. Please keep reading on MYB0XN 0VL D0T C0M. In the inner world of his body, it no longer resembled an inner space, but looked more like a real world. In addition to the rising and setting of the sun and the moon, there were also mountains, rivers, and lush vegetation. There was only one figure in this world, and it was Yi Futian. This was not Yi Futian himself, but that were born out of this world, representing the will of this space. He stood high above the sky, looking at the entire world that was constantly in the process of being created. When the sun and the moon rotate, there are rotations between life and death, Futian muttered to himself. Hence, the living things born in this world began to experience the cycle of life and death and gradually developed their own rules of survival, which allowed life to flourish as well as to wither and die. His body flew high in the void and came to a corner of his own world, which was still relatively barren. Futian looked at all this and then looked at the sky above. This one glance had taken a long time, gone through many rotations of the moon and the sun. The rotation of the sun and the moon, the alternation of life and death, creation and destruction means that everything in the world had two polarities accompany each other, Futian secretly said in his heart, as he observed and comprehended this world. After many days, currents of destruction began manifesting in this empty space. A sea appeared in the area below, which contained various storms of destruction to symbolize death and destruction. Even the flames are more than just one kind of flame. There is Yang, the most aggressive divine solar fire, and there is also the Yin fire, Futian said to himself again. He was bringing all of his perceptions of the world to this space to start a creation that would give birth to the rules power of this world and perfect them. After a long time, Futian created many elemental rules. He returned to the void, sat cross-legged, and fell into deep meditation. If he was creating the world, what was the meaning of the heavenly path back then? What did the 8 legions under the heavenly path represent? They were in charge of the world's order on behalf of the heavenly path. Was the power they controlled given by the heavenly path as well? With a thought, Futian appeared in the area below, leaning on a tree. This towering tree seemed to be morphed by the ancient tree of the world, and it was a part of this world. Futian leaned against the tree and looked up into the sky, watching the sun and the moon rising and setting, and the days passed. Here, it seemed that there was no such concept as time. The sun and the moon turn into a day. The time I experienced here is the same as the one on the outside. Since this is the world of my own making, does it mean that I can change the movement of time as well? Futian thought. It was an incredibly bold idea. Time itself was no more than an arbitrary construct. Did it exist in absolute terms? But if one were to try to make the time different from it, perhaps it would still be rather challenging. Futian just sat there like that, day after day, watching the alternation between the sun and the moon. There was no time limitation in cultivation, and Futian had cultivated to yet another level. Time passed incredibly fast for him, and the outside world was changing every day. There were more and more cultivators who emerged daily. And recently, terribly shocking news had been going around, spreading to every corner of the world. People in Yi Imperial Palace had gotten the news as well. At this moment, many of them had gathered together to discuss whether or not to interrupt Futian's cultivation. Let the madam decide, Lord Chun proposed as he looked at Hua Jiu, who was coming over this way. It was better to ask Hua Jiu to decide. I'll go tell him, Hua Jiu responded. This is not a trivial matter. It was best to let Futian know. Everyone nodded. Then Hua Jiu came to Futian's place of cultivation and walked not far from him. Behind her, the little condor had delivered a message to Futian. Suddenly, Futian opened his eyes, looked towards Hua Jiu and smiled softly. Jiu. Hua Jiu walked over next to Futian and sat down, saying, A lot has happened in the outside world these past few years. You have been cultivating without interruption. But there is some news not long ago that may cause many people in the Imperial Palace to want to go out and investigate for themselves. Futian was stunned for a moment, a little surprised. He was not worried about someone eavesdropping on their conversations. What's going on? Futian asked. It is rumored that in the heavenly emperor realm, the path of the emperors had appeared, and the cultivators from everywhere have rushed over to check it out, said Huajiu. Yi Futian understood. Did the path of the emperors appear? If so, it was expected for the cultivators from Yi Imperial Palace to want to go there themselves. Heavenly Emperor Realm, a world in decline, was once a prosperous domain in the past. Now, the path of the emperors had shown itself. Two people came to Yi Futian's mind immediately. One was that extremely enchanted genius talent, the heir of the Heavenly Emperor Realm, Ji Wudao, who seized the ruins of the old Heaven Court and obtained its inheritance. This man was a bewitching existence. In addition, there was another person, the unparalleled existence, that Supreme Sword Lord, said to be the daughter of the Emperor, incomparable from past to present. The world would lose much color without her. She, who was the daughter of the Heavenly Emperor, was also the cultivator who commanded the Heaven Realm in later eras. Was she still around? There were 7 realms today, but only 6 emperors were known. Among them, Heaven Realm's presence was almost unknown. That legendary, unparalleled figure seemed to be a forbidden existence, with hardly anyone ever mentioning her. Was Ji Wudao a disciple of hers? More importantly, Yi Futian had a feeling that this person must have occupied a pivotal position in the past and may have been involved in many secrets. Very possibly, she was the key to many things. The path of the emperors has materialized. Naturally, I have to go and take a look, Yi Futian said. In the times after the collapse of the heavenly path, there was no path of the emperor to be found. In order to become a great emperor, in addition to having unparalleled talent, one also needed some extraordinary chance. However, Yi Futian still had no idea what kind of opportunity would be. But now the path of the emperor's sudden appearance may be part of the puzzle. He was not the only one in Yi Imperial Palace, as there were many other cultivators. For example, the West Emperor who had returned, the cultivators from West Imperial Palace, the cultivators from Lost Clan, as well as the many people around him. All of them would be going through that step in the future. They all wanted to go see, and Yi Futian would not miss it either. In fact, now that he had transformed, it was easy for the others to fear him, so he should not be out and about. However, there was an agreement between the 6 emperors, and under the circumstances, the cultivators from the 6 realms may be present, which meant that all 6 emperors may also be there for the occasion. As such, his safety was ensured. Under the great emperor, many desired to kill him, including those returning emperors of the ancient god clans. However, with his current cultivation and strength, very few below the grade of the great emperor could actually manage to hurt him. Yi Futian and Hua Ju got up and walked outside with the little condor following closely behind. They came to the front of the great hall, and everyone was waiting for them there already. When they saw Yi Futian, everyone bowed and saluted, calling out Palace Lord. / please keep reading on MYB0XN0 VL D0T C0M. They found that Yi Futian's temperament had changed again. Currently, Yi Futian already possessed a trace of temperament that could only belong to the great emperors. This temperament was hard to quantify or describe, but as soon as he stood before them, he seemed to be the only one in this world. They knew then that Yi Futian had already embarked on his path of the emperors. Even those well acquainted with Yi Futian, such as Lord Qin, had submitted to Yi Futian once upon a time because they valued Yi Futian's potential and his position as the heir of Ziwei the Great. They may be polite to each other, but their respect was not coming from the heart. But it was different now. Everyone in Yi Imperial Palace had changed their attitude towards Yi Futian. This change was not intentional, but an invisible progression. All of it was because Yi Futian's strength had reached another level, and in the future he was destined to become a great emperor himself. Since the path of the emperors has appeared, people who had cultivated to the peak of Renhuang and above, prepare to leave if you want to come, and you can go with me, Yi Futian said to everyone. In truth, there was no other preparation that was needed. In other words, They had been ready and could leave at any time. When Yi Futian saw everyone was looking in his direction, he understood what they were thinking. He stepped forward and stood in front of the main hall, looking at Yi Imperial Palace down below. He said loudly, "While I am out, I will seal off Yi Imperial Palace after I leave. Everyone will have to work a little harder during this time and focus on cultivating inside Yi Imperial Palace." "Palace Lord, we understand." "Palace Lord, go in peace. We will be fine." Voices spoke up one after another, responding to reassure Yi Futian. Yi Futian wanted to seal off Yi Imperial Palace for its safety, and they understood this very well. Very well. Yi Futian's mind turned slightly. Immediately, divine power spread out from him, extending towards Yi Imperial Palace. In just a moment, his rule's divine power had enveloped the entire Yi Imperial Palace, leaving just an opening. "Let's go." Yi Futian took a group of cultivators and left. Once they walked out of Yi Imperial Palace, Yi Futian sealed the opening behind him, and suddenly the vast Yi Imperial Palace was like a cocoon, shrouded by the divine light and formed a world of its own. It was so indestructible that even the likes of Futian the Great would be hard-pressed to get through it. Compared with the other 6 realms, the Heavenly Emperor realm did not seem to have a strong presence. However, after the great changes in the world, the Heaven Realm had also opened up a space passage, which could be used directly to commute from the Heavenly Emperor realm to the original realm. Cultivators of the Heavenly Emperor realm would also follow the space passage to come here to cultivate. Of course, compared to the land of the 6 realms, the Heavenly Emperor realm did not open up many passages. Nonetheless, a few had been uncovered. Yi Futian and the others followed a space passageway and came to the Heaven Realm from the original realm. They were stunned when they arrived in the Heaven Realm. When they looked up into the sky, Yi Futian was quite surprised to find that above them there was nothing but a chaotic space. There was no firmament above the Heaven Realm. What happened in the Heaven Realm back then? They moved in one direction with incredible speed, traveling in the air. There was no firmament above the Heaven Realm, but there were land masses on the ground. These continents were full of ancient atmosphere, and many buildings on the continents were buildings from ancient times. They encountered many other continents of ruins that had barely any traces of inhabitants as they moved along. What happened to the Heaven Realm before? Yi Futian whispered. Just looking at everything in front of him, he could feel that many years ago, the Heaven Realm must have experienced a terrifying battle for this to occur. As far as he knew, the Heaven Realm was once extremely prosperous. In the era of the Heavenly Emperor, the Heaven Realm was once a supreme realm, surpassing all other realms. But for what reason had it become so? Many cultivators in the Heaven Realm have migrated elsewhere. It is said that they have gone to other realms. For example, cultivators in today's Heaven Realm were said to be the least among the 7 realms. Supreme, Sword Lord explained. They had seen a few well-to-do continents on their way and saw many cultivators there. However, compared to the prosperity of the mainland in the Divine Prefecture, there was still quite a gap. Even in the Devil World and the Dark World, the number of cultivators was far greater than the Heaven Realm. However, they didn't pay much attention to this. Their purpose this time was not to observe the Heaven Realm, but to go where the path of the emperors had manifested, which was also the ruins of the former Heavenly Palace. After they had inquired about the location, they focused on getting to their destination. On the way, they met many other cultivators who were going in the same direction. Many of them were cultivators from the Heavenly Emperor realm, but many came from the ruins continent from all parts of the world. The unveiling of the path of the emperors was a shocking news to the entire 7 realms. The cultivators from the 7 realms who were on the ruins continent rushed over after hearing the news. According to legend, the Heaven Realm was passed down through the Deva in ancient times. The Heavenly Palace was located at the highest point of the former Heaven Realm, which had many layers. Yi Futian and the others came to where the Heavenly Palace was located. The number of cultivators they had encountered on the way gradually increased, and all of them were moving in the same direction. As they went all the way up, they came to a place shrouded in clouds and mists. Looking far ahead, there was a boundless and mass heaven's gate, spanning a distance of 100 miles. The gate was engraved with runes, appearing majestic and grand, as a sacredness permeated from the heaven's gate itself. However, this gate was not intact, as it had suffered some damages, with many visible cracks. There was a sky stairwell under the heaven's gate, which was equally boundless and massive. This was the place that must be passed through before anyone could enter the heavenly palace. The scene in front of him bore some semblance to the old heaven court relics, and it seemed that they were indeed of the same heritage. Futian looked at that massive heaven's gate from a distance and thought it was the most magnificent gate he had ever beheld. Many people stopped here despite themselves to marvel at the gate when they arrived here. "We're here." The cultivators next to Futian also looked at the door with a sense of disbelief in their hearts. The impact they felt was beyond words. "Heaven's gate. Let's go in." Futian was moving forward in the air and stepped inside the heaven's gate. Aside from that, many cultivators had gone inside the heaven's gate as well in other directions. After the crossing of heaven's gate, everything seemed different. There was no heaven on the outside, but inside it seemed to be an entirely different and independent world. According to legend, there were 99 heavens in the heavenly palace. The heavenly emperor resided in the highest layer of heaven, from where he ruled the heaven realm. There were countless able cultivators in these 99 heavens who lived here, and each had its own cultivation court. This sky stairwell was the only way to access the heavens. However, even the sky stairwell could not reach the last 9 heavens any further unless it was with explicit permission from above. However, this sky stairwell was not intact either and had been damaged. It had not been repaired to date, and many places were broken. "Is the sovereign princess not here?" Futian looked up at the sky stairwell and thought to himself, if the sovereign princess is still around, how could she have allowed all these cultivators to come inside the heavenly palace so unceremoniously? Why would the path of the emperors appear inside the heavenly palace? They continued their way up, and their speed was incredible. When they were moving upward into the sky, Futian's divine consciousness scanned over many areas of the heavenly palace. The land of the heavenly palace was incredibly vast. Even his divine consciousness could only cover part of the area. He saw many cultivation courts and buildings that dated back to ancient times. They were impressive and splendid, and most of them were pure white and extremely clean-looking, but most of them had suffered some damage. What kind of battle happened in the heavenly palace back then? Futian's heart palpitated. Did the battle of the great emperors shatter the heavenly palace? However, he also saw a lot of cultivators at the heavenly palace, who must be people from the heavenly imperial palace of today. These people, led by Wudao, kept a low profile in the outside world. But in the battle at the old heaven court, the heavenly imperial palace demonstrated extraordinary combat effectiveness. Wudao, great sky lords black and white almighty, the 4 heavenly kings, and the 9-star lords were notable figures. More importantly, it was still unknown whether more powerful existences were hidden within this heavenly palace. Futian and the others passed through layers of heaven, and there seemed to be no end to the heavenly palace. They continued upward without encountering any obstacles. When they got to the 90th layer of heaven, they could feel a heavenly might that came from the sky, as the sky stairwell was also coming to an end. But their pace did not slow as they continued moving through the sky, continued making their way upwards and passing through, layer after layer. If this were in the era of the heavenly emperor, anyone who dared to come through that last 9 layers of heaven would be automatically executed and punished by heaven. In the last 9 heavens, Futian saw many examples of ancient architecture which had been repaired and maintained. These buildings and the cultivation courts were filled with powerful aura, as they were the residences of mighty cultivators in the heaven realm today. But at this time there was no one around. Everyone must have reached the very top. As they continued upward, the heavenly might was becoming stronger as well. When they finally reached the 99th heaven, a heavenly palace towering high above them, the heavenly might was coming from above the palace, and the aura that came from it was enough to make Yi Futian's heart beat wildly. Not just Yi Futian, but everyone around him felt it as well. An extremely sharp will flashed through their eyes. Perfect will. Yi Futian fixed his attention on the sky in front of him. It was the most primitive kind of will. There were cultivators from all over the world in this world, and the top figures of the 7 realms had arrived at different positions. In addition, there were top cultivators from various worlds, including Futian the Great, whom Yi Futian intended on killing before, as well as other inheritors of ancient emperors from the other worlds. All of them had come under this sky. At this time, many cultivators had also noticed Yi Futian's arrival. After all, Yi Futian was way too dazzling in existence today. Although no great emperor was backing him, he was nonetheless one of the top existences in the known world, a supreme cultivator who had slain the ancient emperor. After the news of the battle came out, it sent shockwaves throughout the 7 realms, but Yi Futian never emerged again after that. He had been cultivating in retreat ever since, until his presence under the heaven today. The cultivators from the heavenly imperial palace stood above the heavenly palace, and Ji Wu Dao was among them. His temperament was extraordinary and had changed quite a bit compared to what it was in the past. He glanced at Yi Futian. Almost everyone who should be here was here. Yi Futian felt these gazes upon him. He glanced in all directions and saw many people were cultivating. There were divine powers that circulated upon those top figures. Today, just after a few years, everyone was improving and transforming. Moreover, this firmament may be able to help them in their cultivation. Above the firmament, the sky seemed to be nurturing a terrifying aura of the great path. From this sky, Yi Futian could sense a familiar aura that he had experienced many times before, an aura possessed only by some divine items. Take Wangshan Watchtower, for example. Wangshan Watchtower was an immensely powerful divine item, but the hands of the Millet Emperor had truly excavated it. There was also the Divine Ruler, which was also of similar aura. Heavenly Path. Yi Futian's eyes were extremely sharp as he felt the aura of the firmament, and his heart was greatly troubled. After the collapse of the heavenly path, some divine items had come to the world, which was left by the heavenly path. According to legend, Wangshan Watchtower was the gate to the heavenly path. However, the heavenly path had collapsed, so this could not be the heavenly path here in its totality. Therefore, only one possibility was that this was part of the heavenly path. In this corner of the sky in the heavenly imperial palace, there was a part of the heavenly path. What could it possibly mean? Could it be related to the destructive attacks that heavenly realm had suffered back then? Many secrets may have a direct connection with the heavenly imperial palace. Yi Futian even had a faint suspicion that perhaps his existence had something to do with the heavenly imperial palace. Path of the emperors. Yi Futian murmured. The era before the collapse of the heavenly path was the era of the gods. If this was part of the heavenly path, then this here was indeed the path of the emperors. Divine relic! Came an exclamation from Yi Futian's side. The person who spoke was the West Emperor. He looked at the sky in front of him, and even as a former ancient emperor, he still couldn't hide the shock he felt. Yi Futian looked at the West Emperor and asked, "Is there a chance for people to step on the path of the emperors and enter the imperial realm?" "Yes, there is," the West Emperor nodded emphatically. "If I just woke up, perhaps I would have thought that the heavenly path had not yet collapsed and that we were still in that era. Whoever created this seemed to have transformed it into the heavenly path. It was man-made." Yi Futian asked in astonishment, "If it weren't man-made, would it be the heavenly path itself?" "That would be impossible." The West Emperor shook his head. This is definitely a miracle. In that era, how did cultivators step onto the path of emperors? Yi Futian asked. He had a former great emperor by his side, but he had been too busy with his cultivation in the past few years and had never had a serious conversation with the West Emperor. Perhaps it was because the great emperor had used Shi Qiao's physical form, so he was not so willing to face the West Emperor. Now, at this point, he needed to understand a few things. Why would this divine relic have the ability to allow others to step on the path of the emperors? The path generates heaven, earth, and all other matter. It gave birth to the universe and is responsible for its operation. The West Emperor looked solemn as he looked up into the sky. He continued, that is, everything in the world is born of the path, and this path is referring to the heavenly path. The universe is operating with the will of the heavenly path. In the era before the collapse of the heavenly path, cultivators cultivate to comprehend the rules of heaven and earth until they realize the order of the great path, achieving divine power. Then they were baptized by the divine tribulation, which ushered in transformation, resonating with the heavenly path. Once their pursuit of perfecting the divine power is accomplished, it is time for the path to transform. The cultivators themselves transformed into a kind of great path rules under the witness of the heavenly path, casting the body of way, producing infinite life force and infinite will. At this realm, it is known as the realm of the great emperor. After the West Emperor finished speaking, he looked at Yi Futian and asked, "Do you understand what I just said?" Yi Futian nodded. At his level of cultivation, how could he not understand what the West Emperor meant? The realm of the great emperor was forged by one's divine power, and it was used to control the operation of some great path order. Those who could do so were symbolic figures, and no ordinary mortals could be in this realm. Therefore, they were known as heavenly gods. What about those who defy the heavenly path? Yi Futian asked again. Those who defy the heavenly path are ruthless individuals, the West Emperor continued. They want to forge their divine powers by cutting off the path after stepping onto the path of the emperors because they were unwilling to bend under the heavenly path. Those who conform to the heavenly path are invincible under the emperors, even if they have not entered the imperial realm. And most who go against the heavenly path will be wiped out. And if they are lucky enough to survive, they will be disabled. They cut down the path as a way of cultivation to enter a state of selflessness and limitlessness and then forge their paths. If they were able to achieve it, they are akin to little heavenly paths. After Yi Futian heard it, he understood it in an instant. For example, he had cultivated and created his world. If he could achieve perfection, he was the little heavenly path that he made. In his world, his will was the will of the heavenly path. He understood just how ambitious those who went against the heavenly path were. They were unwilling to live under the heavenly path and wanted to create their micro-heavenly paths. They knew it was an unnatural act, so eventually a battle among the gods erupted, causing the collapse of the heavenly path. Nonetheless, those who defy heaven and cut down the path seem to have paid a heavy price in the end. In the battle of the heavenly path, the gods perished, but in some sense they were successful. They had caused the collapse of the heavenly path. Yi Futian didn't know what to think of those people. Their paths were utterly different from his own, and they were far more ruthless. Yi Futian had a feeling that his discovery of his path was partly due to luck, not a creation in any meaningful sense. It seemed that there was some power guiding him, including the existence of the ancient tree of the world. Please keep reading on MYB0XN0VL D0TC0M. Divine tribulation is a tribulation, but it is also a baptism, Yi Futian remarked as he looked up above the firmament. Yes, the West Emperor nodded. This was the case in the era before the collapse of the heavenly path. Therefore, if this piece of heaven was transformed by the heavenly path, then all subsequent tribulations were the tribulations from the former heavenly path. Therefore, it means that the path of the emperors had already been cut off, the West Emperor said. Finally, Yi Futian understood what cutting off the path of the emperors meant. The path to becoming a great emperor was subsumed under the heavenly path. The heavenly path was like the mother of all things. It was in charge of the order of the world and the running of the universe. In the era post-heavenly path, all the cultivators lost the source of orders and resorted to relying on treasures left over from the ancient times to create perfect paths, just like in ancient times. Or, under the shadows of the great emperors, those great emperor characters, in some sense, were spokespeople of the heavenly path in the human world. Their paths were perfect, inheriting the order of the heavenly path. However, even if a perfect path was created, becoming an emperor was still impossible. The heavenly path collapsed, and the path of the emperors was cut off. But now, the path of the emperors appeared in front of him. Yi Futian suddenly thought of one thing. He had now created a world. If he stepped into the imperial realm, his path would be the micro-heavenly path. Could this micro-heavenly path shelter other cultivators to help them become emperors? He remembered that he once used the ancient tree of the world to protect Long Chin and the others in their cultivation, which allowed them to forge perfect paths. This meant that his idea was entirely possible. The so-called micro-heavenly path was a kind of heavenly path. However, in his world, if he was strong enough, his path was stronger than the heavenly path itself. In some sense, his would be the great heavenly path. Other than Yi Futian, the people around them listened to the conversation between the two. They were all rather curious by what they heard, and their eyes looked toward the sky. This sky was probably also transformed by the will of the heavenly path in this corner of the sky. At this moment, they had a feeling that becoming a great emperor was no longer so out of reach. Perhaps there was a chance for them to touch it. They were not the only ones with those thoughts. The people who came here before them agreed, cultivating in different locations. There are a lot of strangers. Yi Futian turned his attention to other directions. He saw many cultivators that he had never seen before. He had seen a few people who came to the Futian clan with Donghuang Diuan previously, but there were a few others he had never seen before. Of course, every world had some casual cultivators, all of which were on the old monster level. If the appearance of God's continent before was not enough to attract the attention of some old monsters, then the arrival of the path of the emperors was enough to draw out all the old monsters who were cultivating and hiding. Would the dawn of the age of gods become a distinction in time? The 6 emperors did not show themselves here. Perhaps they had reached some agreement, or there were other factors. Many people looked at Yi Futian, then withdrew their gazes. This space was very quiet and there was no fighting, but everyone knew that there was no fighting only because now was not the time. Some cultivators looked at Donghuang Diuan to try to gauge her attitude. However, she said nothing, just continued to cultivate quietly. Above the heavenly palace, Ji Wudao drew his attention back. When he raised his head to look at the sky again, there was no longer any arrogance in his eyes. There was only respect and piety that came from the heart. It was as if that sky above was the manifestation of his beliefs. All the cultivators cultivated quietly. Yi Futian and the others also found a place, and then they sat down cross-legged. "Sir, I have one more question," Yi Futian said, looking at the West Emperor. "Palace, Lord Yi, please," replied West Emperor. Before the collapse of the heavenly path, the divine tribulation was both a tribulation and a baptism. What happened after the heavenly path collapsed? Yi Futian asked, "Who controls the order of the world, and what is tribulation? I had heard that cultivation was an act against heaven, thus disallowed by today's heaven." Hearing Yi Futian's words, the West Emperor looked surprised and said, "After the path of the emperors was cut off, those who forged the perfect path were indeed not tolerated by the order of the world today. As for the order that operates today, it is still a mystery. Is it possible that it is the micro-heavenly path that someone realized later on?" Yi Futian thought of their earlier conversation. The West Emperor glanced at him, a little shocked by Yi Futian's thinking. In the battle of the heavenly path, there were people who cultivated by defying the natural order who wanted to replace the heavenly path. Therefore, in some sense, your guess is not unreasonable. I don't know what happened between heaven and earth, or what took place in the latter days, but the truth should not be too far away, the West Emperor said. After the age of the gods began, everything was exposed. Yi Futian nodded and didn't continue to press. Thinking of any of this now was meaningless. What he should be doing instead was cultivating. Many of the people around him had gone through the second divine tribulation of the Great Path, and some were even on the verge of Emperor-to-be level. Once they reached this level, with the help of the heavenly path, they would have the opportunity to resonate with the heavenly path and be baptized by the divine tribulation to embark on the path of the emperors. Such an opportunity had to be seized, of course. Above the heavenly palace, there was a group of cultivators heading towards the area below and descending from the 99 heavens. Now, the people who should be here were almost so, and no one should disturb them here, save for those super strong old monsters. Ordinary cultivators would not come up to the 99 heavens. In a quiet space, the cultivators from major camps were standing in different locations to cultivate. They were very far away from each other. On a gigantic stone pillar in the heaven court were cultivators from the dark world. At this moment, the aura upon one of them was tossing and roaring, as if compelled by a divine power. This was causing a change up above in the firmament. Many people turned their attention to that cultivator. That cultivator from the dark world was an old monster-level figure, not a cultivator from the dark court. The divine power that surged on his body seemed to indicate something more. Many cultivators in Yi Imperial Palace glanced over there, and they knew in their hearts that those more visible cultivators were not top figures there. Presently, a group of old monsters had emerged to show themselves, one after another. They may have been cultivating for countless years, but because of the collapse of the heavenly path, the path of the emperors had been cut off, so they never had a chance. Now they finally had the opportunity to step onto the path of the emperors. It is probably another ancient emperor. Supreme, Sword Lord, fixed his attention there. Just like the ones from the ancient god clans in the divine prefecture, they have endured this for countless years, waiting for such an opportunity. Now that the order of heaven appeared here, they wanted this chance to return to the peak. The West Emperor cast a glance that way and said, yes, in that era, there were probably a lot of people like me, waiting to come back. When the heavenly path collapsed, why did it almost wipe out all of the great emperors? What happened? Asked the Supreme Sword Lord. There was a hint of fear in West Emperor's eyes. It seemed as if it came from the depths of his memory. It was an extremely dark time, an age of pure madness. He didn't respond, and Supreme Sword Lord didn't ask any more questions. However, he understood that once the opportunity arose, the ancient emperors of the past would return one after another to try to re-enter the imperial realm. Whether they could return to their former peak level was still something waiting to be seen. Concentrate on cultivating. You have reached the peak level of your current realm and created Taishang swordsmanship. You are only one step away from attracting the divine tribulation. Many heirs of the great emperors have already cast their own divine power, but their divine power comes from inheritance, not from their own comprehension. So, their divine powers cannot communicate with the order of heavenly path. Their realms are not necessarily deeper than yours, the West Emperor said to the Supreme Sword Lord. Even though the Supreme Sword Lord had been cultivating for a long time, in front of someone like the West Emperor, he was still a junior. Understood. Supreme Sword Lord nodded, closing his eyes and cultivating as he was before. The realm of near deity was a very crucial step in that he had forged his own independent path. Now, with the order of heavenly path looming, they were just one step away from being baptized by the heavenly path. But this one step was probably not as easy as it sounded. Yi Futian had entered a state of cultivation. He closed his eyes to improve his perception, and his perception reached beyond the firmament. He was comprehending that particular heavenly path. At this moment, Futian had a very curious feeling. He sensed a familiar aura, which seemed very similar to his own path. This also seemed to confirm some speculation on his part that his ancient tree of the world might have something to do with the heavenly path. There may be some connection between the micro-heavenly path that he cast and the heavenly path, which accounted for the similarities. He immersed in this perception to feel the order of the heavenly path that appeared before him. Another thought appeared in Futian's mind. If the heavenly path had a consciousness, what about the heavenly path in front of him? Did it also have consciousness? If it existed, whose consciousness was it? Futian did not perceive the existence of consciousness, but the familiarity allowed him to keenly capture the power of the order in the heavenly path. He felt the order of the 5 elements, the thunder and the destruction. Is it because my own micro-heavenly path has bred these divine powers that the resonance allowed me to perceive all this? Futian wondered secretly. He thought that this must be the reason. If so, then would the reverse hold true? If he could feel other divine powers of orders from this heavenly path, would he be able to arouse the resonance of the micro-heavenly path inside his body, giving birth to a new divine power of order and making it his own? He thought this possibility was very likely. When he thought of this, Futian entered a state of selfless cultivation. Now his realm was equivalent to having passed through triple divine tribulations. After being baptized by the divine tribulations, once he hit the level of perfection, he would officially become an emperor. It was just that, because of the particularities of his own cultivation, he was somewhat different from everyone else. His skills could not be totally quantified, but once his micro-heavenly path entered an equivalent complete state, he had a feeling that he would be stronger than the average great emperors. In regards to cultivation, time passed by very slowly. Everyone was immersed in their own cultivation, not disturbing each other. With the passage of time, the resonance between that previous cultivator and the heavenly path was becoming stronger, and the will of the heavenly path was falling, resonating with his body. Even the sky had undergone some changes, with divine light coming down. A divine tribulation was brewing. Is he ready to step on the path of the emperors? Someone wondered as he stared at the man. If it was the divine tribulation, then he would be the next emperor to be. The cultivators from the dark court looked at that old monster-level existence and saw that his resonance with the heavenly path was becoming stronger. The light of order was already descending from the sky, and then a terrifying aura manifested. The tribulation is coming. Everyone's eyes sharpened as they looked up and stared at the sky above. At this moment, Futian sensed that in the order of the heavenly path, there was a dark, destructive beginning to form. It echoed with the divine power to turn it into the divine tribulation. The times are indeed different. Futian was feeling pretty shocked inside. The era before the collapse of the heavenly path and the era after the collapse of the heavenly path were different. The tribulations that he had experienced and the divine tribulations as experienced by other cultivators intended on killing them. But the tribulation of heavenly path was meant to be more like a baptism. No wonder all the cultivators of today's world said that the path of the emperors was cut off because it had been cut off. The creation of perfect paths required the aid of divine items, and surviving the tribulation was akin to coming under attack from the divine realm itself. Except for those who cultivated by cutting off the path, surviving the divine tribulation meant nothing because no path of the emperors was available to them. But this firmament made everything possible. This was part of the heavenly path. Whose will constructed this piece of heaven? Futian secretly exclaimed in his heart. He opened his eyes and saw the man soar into the sky until he was beyond it. The divine tribulation descended, and it was equally terrifying. The 99 heavens and the heavenly imperial palace were penetrated by the light of divine tribulation, which completely shrouded this corner of the sky. In that era, what will happen if one fails to survive the tribulation? Yi Futian asked the West Emperor. The tribulation of this era could obliterate those who failed. The tribulation was here for the express purpose of destruction. Failure to survive the tribulation means to never cross that hurdle. One will always stay at that level, unable to progress any further. The imperial realm will only be a dream in this lifetime, responded the West Emperor. But for those who can successfully reach this step, the rate of success is undoubtedly high, and they will likely step forward and become great emperors-to-be. Nothing will happen even if they failed at the attempt, just the inability to get past it. Yi Futian was greatly shocked by this revelation. The cultivation environment in ancient times was so different that no one would ever be killed by tribulations. So, there are people who failed to cross the tribulation, but tried to cultivate by cutting down the path? Yi Futian asked. Smart guy, the West Emperor responded. Some will gamble that even if they failed, they are already unparalleled under the Emperor and have reached the top of the cultivation world. But there is no hope to reach the imperial realm. Nevertheless, this still motivated plenty of cultivators to take the risk and use their cultivation as a wager to cultivate by cutting the path. In case of failure, the best case scenario is that they lose their cultivation forever, and the worst is that they will be obliterated by the tribulation from the heavenly path. I heard some elders said that there are those who will cut the path after becoming the great emperor-to-be. Yi Futian looked at the terrifying scene that unfolded above the sky as the divine light of destruction rained down. However, he was unmoved and continued his dialogue with the West Emperor. Yes, after stepping on the path of the emperors, they have a deeper understanding of their realms, and as great emperors-to-be, their chances for success were greater after they cut down the path. However, such characters were a bit too cold-blooded, said the West Emperor. They are too ruthless. Yi Futian couldn't imagine someone who had already embarked on the path of the emperors and was a great emperor-to-be to cut down the path for any reason. This kind of behavior was indeed insane and unimaginable. After becoming the great emperor-to-be, how could anyone be so reluctant to stay under the heavenly path as to choose to cut off the path out of anger? Who created such a crazy method of cultivation? Boom! The terrifying divine tribulation resounded throughout heaven and earth, piercing the 99 heavens. The divine power of order surged all around Yi Futian, protecting the cultivators within this area from being affected by the divine tribulation. Almost, Yi Futian glanced at the sky above and said, /please keep reading on MYB0XN 0VL D0T C0M. As great emperors themselves once, how can they possibly fail? All they needed is just an opportunity, the West Emperor continued. Even as great emperors-to-be, they're still not able to contend with you. He was highly confident in Yi Futian's strength. Because Yi Futian was also a great emperor-to-be, he was also obviously a great emperor-to-be who cut down the path. Do you have this much confidence in my strength? Yi Futian asked. You did it before by slaying the great emperor of the Vajra region and crushing 4 ancient emperors by yourself. At that time, it was very likely that their realms had already been recovered by the great emperors-to-be, the West Emperor replied. Great emperors-to-be? Yi Futian showed a look of surprise, because those several existences from the ancient god clans were once great emperors. Their cultivations were unique, different from everyone else's. Because of that, he couldn't really clarify their realms or what they were all about. Yes, the West Emperor nodded. Look at them. Yi Futian turned his attention toward Haotian the Great and several others. He found that they were cultivating in different locations. At this time, they had achieved a particular resonance with the heavenly path, which Yi Futian was well aware of. They are absorbing the power of order within the heavenly path. This is what the great emperors-to-be tried to do when they wanted to reach perfection. Like me, they were great emperors from the past. So the changes before becoming great emperors-to-be are not that different. That is not the case with you. The few of them were already great emperors-to-be when they first attacked ye imperial palace. However, we have no idea how they did that. We do know that ye imperial palace had no power to fight back at the time. The West Emperor explained slowly. However, there are some oddities. For example, the differences before and after they became great emperors-to-be were not so great, yet they seemed not strong enough. The human realm. An idea surfaced in Yi Futian's mind. Previously, the human ancestor of the human realm must have invited them to cultivate in the human realm. In the human realm, the path of the emperors may have been revealed as well. Is it possible that it might be the little heavenly path? Yi Futian asked. Those who have achieved little heavenly path must have crossed the realms in the little heavenly path, baptized by the divine tribulation, and become great emperors-to-be, but it is different from the real heavenly path. That is a possibility. When the West Emperor heard what Yi Futian said, his eyes sharpened. Yi Futian's guess was plausible. Then, it stood to reason that they hadn't expected the path of the emperors to appear. Otherwise, they might have waited until today instead of being baptized by the divine tribulation in advance. If this was the case, they should be making up for the shortcomings by now and let the heavenly path baptize them. Yi Futian nodded. He understood most of everything now. If the others were great emperors-to-be, his strength was more significant than the others. Could it be that the great emperor-to-be who cultivated by cutting down the path was just a little bit stronger? More importantly, he was far from reaching perfection at that time, nor was he close to it even now. He was making progress every moment. It would be another significant transformation if he achieved perfection, from great emperor-to-be to become an actual emperor. He passed, just as the West Emperor guessed. That old monster-level character from the Dark World had successfully survived the divine tribulation. Under the baptism of the heavenly path, his body was radiant all over, resonating with the heavenly path as one. However, this temperament would be changed to something different in the outside world. In the direction of the Dark Court, many cultivators looked at the man with some envy, only to hear Lord Shaman say, "Congratulations to the elder for stepping on the path of the emperors." This was the first cultivator who had stepped over after the appearance of the path of the emperors and became a great emperor-to-be, someone who had already embarked on the true path of the emperors. The great emperor-to-be was a great emperor. It was just a matter of time. Congratulations, elder. Many people in the Dark World bowed and saluted the cultivator. The great emperor-to-be, the future great emperor. After the collapse of the heavenly path, the path of the emperors was cut off. Today, the 6 emperors ruled the world to maintain orders. No matter how strong the cultivators in attendance today were, they all revered the great emperors. And at this very moment, a future great emperor had emerged. There was some envy and some jealousy, but at the same time there was respect as well. Before that, even if the other man were an ancient emperor, no one would care about someone who was once an ancient emperor who could not become a great emperor. He would never get enough respect. However, the moment he became the great emperor-to-be, everything changed. Most people from the Dark World were filled with respect, except for a few people, such as the heirs of the great emperors from the other realms, who were a lot less respectful. From their perspective, the appearance of the path of the emperors and the dawn of the age of the gods would usher in their paths to become emperors. Compared to them, these ancient great emperors just took a shortcut. The old gods of the past would indeed be surpassed by the new. That cultivator appeared quite indifferent to all this, nodding calmly. His eyes looked up into the sky, and he didn't seem to care too much about the others' attitude. Everyone who was beneath the great emperors were like mere insects. Stepping onto the path of the emperors was the only way to become a deity. Anyone and anything that was not deity were not worthy of their gaze. He was a great emperor many years ago, and in this day and age he would be a great emperor again. After the divine tribulation, divine power circulated him as he continued to comprehend and cultivate, ignoring everyone else. He was just a great emperor to be for now. Only when he finally returned to the realm of the great emperor could he be completely at ease, having returned in the truest sense. The divine power circled him, resonated with the heavenly path as he was bathing in the divine glory of the heavenly path. He concentrated on cultivating, intending to train his body to reach the perfect great path. His divine power was endless. When everyone saw this, they didn't bother him. It was different at the level of the great emperor. Even his temperament had changed. Before, some could still communicate with that other man, but now they were probably no longer on the same level. They must also focus on cultivating to fight for an opportunity, so they might also step onto the path of the emperors. Time continued to pass. Above the sky, black lotuses suddenly appeared. They were pitch black and profound. Their presence darkened the entire sky. Then many black lotuses appeared in the boundless world above the heavenly palace. In each black lotus was a terrifying power of destructive rules. What? Many people revealed curious expressions as they looked up at the black lotus flowers that appeared between heaven and earth, especially the massive black lotus born in the sky. Everyone could feel a terrifying aura of destruction in just a glance, as if that black lotus was synonymous with destruction. A black lotus birthed by the heavenly path? Many cultivators were shocked to their core. The black lotus was still growing, continuously pressing downwards, as its destructive divine power grew more frightening. Buzz! Voices rose into the air, and most of them were cultivators from the dark world, including Lord Shaman, the great shaman of the Dark Court. They showed up not far away from the black lotus and saw wisps of black, destructive current circulated inside it. The divine power of rules seemed to have condensed into an entity that would inflict death on whatever it touched. This gigantic black lotus spun in the void, and strands of destructive divine power crept towards the surroundings. There was a cultivator who was a little too close. He stretched out his hand boldly as strands of terrifying suction appeared in his palm. Instantly, the suction swallowed the destructive currents into the palm of his hand. But in just an instant, his face changed to an expression of extreme fear. No! In the next moment, his body turned into smoke and ashes and disappeared into wisps of black smoke, which dissipated. It was as if this man had never existed. In the meantime, his soul and spirit had dispersed and scattered. What everyone saw in front of them made their hearts jump, and many involuntarily retreated. There was an extreme wariness and vigilance in their eyes as they focused their attention in front of them. There, wisps of black currents were still circulating, sweeping towards the surroundings. However, the currents that emanated from the black lotus could quickly turn a cultivator in the tribulation plane to dust. "Get back, all of you," Lord Shaman said. Suddenly, many people evacuated from this area, except those top cultivators, who remained around the black lotus. This is the purest divine power of destruction, formed by the order of destruction under the heavenly path. An old man from the dark court piped up. This was an old man who the world had never before seen. He stared at the black lotus. There was a hint of greed in his eyes. This black lotus was a divine item nurtured by the heavenly path. Upon obtaining it, it was easier to perceive the divine power and stronger powers of the order from the heavenly path. Therefore, it made it possible to resonate with the heavenly path and step onto the path of the emperors. Other cultivators had noticed it as well, their eyes fixed on the black lotus. Even if they were not cultivators from the dark world, a hint of greed flashed through their eyes. The divine items bred by the heavenly path had always been the treasures that the world coveted since the beginning of times. Who didn't want to snatch up such an item? Many people stared over there, and some were even moving towards it. Lord Shaman turned his head as he glanced at the cultivators from everywhere and said, "This black lotus of destruction was born from darkness, and it is a divine item that belongs to the dark world. Since this corner of heaven can produce this black lotus, it will inevitably produce other divine items in the future. If you want to fight for this black lotus, do you think you will be able to keep the other items in the future?" Lord Shaman's words made everyone hesitate for a bit as they looked up into the sky. Path of the Emperors appeared in the heavenly palace, as if there was an incarnation of the heavenly path. Would there be more divine items like this in the future? It was very possible. "If you don't fight us for this black lotus now, we won't fight for the other divine items in the future," Lord Shaman continued. When he spoke, strands of divine power surged around him, which was beyond terrifying. The aura from everyone began to dissipate. It was not entirely because of what Lord Shaman said. It was mainly because the divine power of destruction was not the divine power they had intended to cultivate and comprehend. In other words, the item didn't mean so much to them. If they risked themselves for of it, the result was not worth it. Futian glanced over there, but he didn't participate in any of it. He merely sat quietly. Afterward, he raised his head and looked at the sky again. He was still contemplating the question before whether or not consciousness existed in this heaven. If there was consciousness, whose consciousness was it? The Heavenly Emperor. Why would he want to produce these divine items if it was the Heavenly Emperor? Was it to help the people in the world become enlightened so that they may ascend onto the path of the Emperors? "I am beginning to believe the prophecies made by the Buddha of Destiny," said Futian in a low voice as the people around him nodded in agreement. Supreme Sword Lord said, "I also feel that the era of the gods is coming. The path of the Emperors seems to have been revealed as some kind of a sign." Futian turned around and glanced at everyone. "Concentrate on cultivating, and don't be distracted by everything on the outside. This world may still contain some great opportunities." "Yes, Palace Lord." Everyone nodded. Since Futian said so, maybe he had detected something. When the opportunity arises, one must have the strength to seize it. Futian and the others focused on their cultivation while ignoring the happenings in outer realms. Cultivators from other realms did not fight for the Black Lotus, yet the people of the Dark World had internal struggles, which powerful cultivators did not want this dark divine item for themselves. Some of the more powerful cultivators had ended the lives of many weaker ones during the plunder. Eventually, the remaining cultivators of Dark World came to a consensus to encircle the Black Lotus for cultivation. They immediately sealed it in an area and began to grasp the law of divine power of destruction within it. With that, it formed a power balance as everyone was keeping each other in check, so no one would dare to snatch it for themselves. The existence of the Black Lotus caused the cultivators of all realms to revere this land, to think that a divine item would manifest in this place. Would another show up in other places? Could it be related to her? Supreme Sword Lord mumbled. The sovereign princess was an unparalleled being after all. This place was Heavenly Palace, the dwelling of a heavenly emperor. She was once the daughter of a heavenly emperor. Could the manifestation of the heavenly path in this domain be connected to her? All the cultivators were focusing on their cultivation as time passed slowly. Most of the powerful cultivators and mighty figures were paving their path of the emperors, especially the group of ancient emperors. They were lucky to have survived through the era of the disintegration of the heavenly path in various ways. After waiting for countless years, their hope to return to Imperial Realm had finally come through. For endless years, numerous ancient cultivators could not reach the last tier, the path of the emperors. During this prolonged time, they had been dreaming of the day when they could finally step on the path of the emperors. Now that the opportunity presented itself before them, they would never miss out. Futian paid no heed to Outer Realm, but focused solely on his cultivation. The resonance between him and the sky was gradually becoming stronger. When a divine power reigned from the above and rested on him, many people turned their eyes to look at him. It looks like the previous one was his third divine tribulation. The crowds thought to themselves, as a great emperor-to-be, Yi Futian could sense the law of the heavenly path, creating a resonance and even using it to strengthen his body. An invisible aura flowed through Yi Futian's body, creating a connection between the nearby cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace and himself. At that moment, those people could feel the divine power that moved around him. At once, Supreme Sword Lord, Lord Qin, and the others tried their best to sense it. Although some had already gone through the second divine tribulation, they still had not been through the most crucial part. So, Yi Futian let them meditate on the most refined law of the heavenly path to help them reach their enlightenment. 3 years passed in the blink of an eye. All the powerful cultivators focused on their cultivation, but the time frame was very short for them. After all, many of them were ancient cultivators who had been cultivating for more than 10,000 years. So, this period felt like nothing to them. All the corners in the 99 heavens were eerily silent. All of a sudden, a terrifying aura manifested above the sky. While innumerable people were staring at the sky, some saw a divine mountain above their heads. It was emanating a tremendous divine power that felt dense. All the cultivators who were cultivating opened their eyes immediately and looked at the divine mountain. A significant number of them stopped their cultivation and prepared to plunder it. Please keep reading on MYB0XN0VL D0T C0M. They did not get their hands on the Black Lotus 3 years ago, so they would not miss the chance again. However, the divine mountain continued to expand its size and eventually covered the entire sky. It spanned from the above of the firmament and grew downward. The divine power released from it caused many to refrain from moving closer to it. Boom! The divine mountain did not stop growing in size. Several ancient cultivators went to the ground beneath the divine mountain. A defeating tremor could be heard as it continued to fall from the sky, causing those ancient cultivators to grunt in affliction. Their backs were bent by it as they spat blood from their mouths. With that, they instantly fled from that place. Upon seeing that, the remaining cultivators who coveted it did not dare to act impetuously. The boundless divine mountain descended to the 99 heavens of heavenly emperor realm. The peak of it seemed to stretch all the way to heaven beyond heaven, as if it was boundless. The cultivators from the lower layer of the heavens could feel its presence following its penetration through the uppermost layer. It went on until it penetrated the 99 heavens. The multitude was trembling when they felt a peerless divine power filling the atmosphere. It's a divine item. The people from the lower realm were taken aback after sensing the aura of the divine mountain. Their paths to the 99 heavens were blocked as they penetrated the entire heavens and landed there. This is the second a divine item has fallen from the sky. The crowds glanced at the divine mountain that pierced through the entire 99 heavens and turned to look at the destructive Black Lotus. Even though they could not take the divine item away, they could do their meditation there. Was the will of the heavenly path destroyed following the disintegration of the heavenly path? Many onlookers murmured the question silently. Who could hold such great power? Who could personify the heavenly path and materialize divine items? This feat was something only the heavenly path during ancient times could pull off when it was still ruling the world order. Back then, the 8 legions under the command of the heavenly path were supported by it to rule over the world order in its place. The heavenly emperor realm might replace the gods' continent to become the second hotspot for cultivators from all over the realms, someone muttered, to which everyone agreed. The existence of the heavenly imperial palace following the gods' continent seemed to be the foreshadowing of the significant change in the world and the beginning of the age of the gods. All the powerful cultivators headed to the gods' continent would gather at the heavenly imperial palace. The cultivators from every realm had been showing up to the 99 heavens for the last few years. Ji Wu Dao and the others were staring at the lower ground from the heavenly palace. They were excited for the new age of the Heavenly Emperor realm. The Heaven realm would restore its past glory and become the prime of the 7 realms. At that time, there was a change in the sky when a divine light illuminated Spot. That was a top-tier cultivator of divine prefecture, who people hardly ever seen him. He had been cultivating solitarily in veiled Enigma Mountain of Donghuang Imperial Palace. He was once an ancient emperor, but at that moment, things were about to change for him as he prepared to prove his path to be a great emperor-to-be. Damn, there goes the birth of another great emperor-to-be, many cultivators remarked quietly. The cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace could not keep their cool after seeing the happening. The world had changed so fast over the years that they could no longer keep up with it. The peak of the Runhuang Plain was once the highest tier, but things changed after the discovery of God's ruins. For that reason, many cultivators grew stronger. With the continuous emergence of the ancient cultivators and ancient emperors, the average tribulation plane cultivators had become unimpressive. The manifestation of the heavenly path in Heavenly Emperor realm, the dissension of divine item, and the continuous emergence of great emperor-to-be had turned this era into a chaotic one. Nevertheless, they knew that the people they had seen and faced were the top-tier cultivators in this world. The 6 great emperors were just a level above these powerful individuals. Turning their eyes on Yi Futian, they saw him cultivating quietly without any distraction. Apart from helping them with their cultivation, he had to meditate on forming his micro-heavenly path. Only after he completed its formation could he truly become a great emperor. The appearance of the divine mountain had expedited the occurrence of multiple events in the Heavenly Emperor realm. They caught the attention of cultivators from the 7 realms, who headed toward Heaven realm after hearing about them. Even the cultivators from God's continent passed through the space passage to Heaven realm. Suddenly, many cultivators would show up in the 99 heavens of Heavenly Emperor realm every day. It was exactly like what happened when God's continent first appeared back then. Many cultivators were cultivating on every layer of all 99 heavens in the Heavenly Imperial Palace. They surrounded the gigantic divine mountain and cultivated. Its size was so massive that it spanned across the 99 heavens. Countless cultivators could sense the aura of a great emperor from the divine power that it emanated. They did not know that it was the most primordial aura of the law of the heavenly path. Most of them could not grasp the fullness of it with their current cultivation level. But even if they could only gain enlightenment in a small fraction, it could improve their cultivation significantly. Only those who had survived the second divine tribulation of the Great Path were qualified to grasp the divine power completely. Numerous people gathered around the divine mountain and had their discussions. I've heard that the strongest individuals in the 7 realms have gathered in the 99 heavens. Can anyone confirm this gossip? Someone asked. It's true. Apart from the 6 great emperors, all of the strongest people in the 7 realms have already made it here. One of my seniors told me that our ancestor had informed him that the heavenly path manifested above the 99 heavens. It's a sign of the return of a great emperor. Heavenly path. A person's heart skipped a beat and questioned, "What is the heavenly path?" Have you not heard of the disintegration of the heavenly path during the age of the gods? Similar conversations were held everywhere. The cultivators of the 7 realms began to hear of this once untold secret. The elites had already known about it since the gods' ruin first appeared. However, the change in the Heavenly Imperial Palace caused the secret of the heavenly path and some details about the Battle of the Gods to be leaked. How many of the elites will become the great emperor? Buddha of Destiny had prophesied the emergence of the Age of the Gods in the gods' ruins continent. Is the prophecy really coming true? If the Buddha of Destiny could look into the future, then the prophecy might become a reality soon. In that case, won't it mean that Donghuang the Great has less than 30 years left? Some of the crowd's hearts skipped a beat upon hearing that. They could not imagine that Donghuang the Great who had united and reigned divine prefecture for the last 400+ years, would soon relinquish his fate of the emperor. Could a great emperor be toppled? 2 decades was too short of a time. It would pass in the blink of an eye. Could that person be Yi Futian? If it were Yi Futian, he would highly likely become a great emperor. Otherwise, how else could an era be ended? Yi Futian knew nothing about the people of Outer Realm speculations. He was focused on his cultivation at that time. There was a silhouette inside his world. It was formed by the will of his micro-heavenly path. His inner world continued to develop under the influence of the will. Eventually, several divine mountains that spanned across the entire realm materialized. The presence of the domain of destruction could be felt all around. While he was grasping the power of the heavenly path, he was also perfecting his inner world. On the outside, the people around him had been improving in their cultivation a lot. Some of them even survived the second divine tribulation of the Great Path. Still, no one reached the tier of half-deity plane. Nevertheless, he could feel that West Emperor was about to face his tribulation. The divine power surrounded the latter, while rains would fall within the vicinity from time to time. The aura of the heavenly path above the sky created a resonance with him. As a former ancient emperor, his cultivation level was already sufficient. Therefore, when the path of the emperors appeared, ancient cultivators like them would not find it hard to become the great emperor. After all, they were all once the great emperors. Many powerful cultivators surrounded the divine mountain and cultivated. Like the destructive black lotus, this divine mountain was also a divine item. They could help the cultivators gain enlightenment on the power of the law of the great path. Even so, no one other than the ancient emperors successfully broke through the barrier of the cultivation level. It was not something one could easily attain. The cultivators in the 99 heavens ignored the changes of the lower worlds. Even though people came from different parts of the realms, they paid no heed to any of the crowds. They solely focused on their cultivation. As time passed, there were 2 more ancient emperors who went through their tribulation and entered the great emperor-to-be plane. After such a long time, they could finally revert to their peak form. Yet they did not become impatient, but they cultivated in solitude. At that point, great emperor-to-be plane was no longer invincible in that world. They had to return to the pinnacle of their strength to regain their true self. The death of Vajra realm great emperor had taught them a lesson. Although they were ancient people, the people of the current time could hold a candle to them. The restriction in the world had cut off the path of the emperors from the ladder, or else they would not be in their current state where great emperors were in decline. West Emperor was about to face his divine tribulation. The fact of it caused the cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace to jump for joy. After all, he was one of them. After he survived the tribulation and became a great emperor-to-be, the overall strength of Yi Imperial Palace would further increase. Nevertheless, Yi Futian did not pay much attention to it, seeing that the level he aimed for was already beyond the great emperor-to-be plane. He did not even go to watch West Emperor's tribulation. At the end of the day, that body belonged to Shi Qiyao. Every time he thought of her, he felt sorrowful. The cultivators of West Imperial Palace had mixed feelings about it. However, the return of a great emperor was good news for them. They would have a great emperor among their lineup and become an authentic emperor-level force. Hence, their lifelong dream would finally come true. 3 years passed in a flash. That day, an intimidating divine power emanated from above the sky. Everyone lifted their heads to look at the sky while their hearts palpitated like mad. Will another divine item manifest itself again? 3 years. The gap between the appearance of the destructive Black Lotus and the divine mountain is 3 years. Now, another 3 years have passed. Could this be a coincidence or a fixed pattern? Upon realizing the unique time each of the divine item had appeared, they were taken aback. An unparalleled divine light beamed downward from the sky. It was brimmed with a peerless divine power of space. Following that, the onlookers noticed a divine door dropped from the sky with divine light encircling it. The door seemed to have existed in another dimension. It was packed with the divine power of the law of space. The door continued to descend and stopped above the 99 heavens. The onlooking cultivators' hearts skipped a beat upon seeing that. Suddenly, a few silhouettes could be seen rushing toward that massive divine door. When they stretched their hands to reach the divine door, their hands went through it like it was a void. I couldn't touch it. This must be a spatial divine item. A cultivator of empty divine realm could be seen moving forward. The door of space seemed to be in front of them, yet they could only see and feel it, but not touch it. I'm afraid only those who had gained enlightenment on the purest form of the divine spatial rule power could touch the door of space and get the divine item for themselves, the empty divine realm's cultivator said. Why do I get the feeling that this divine item is prepared for the empty divine realm? Such a casual remark caused the hearts of the crowd to race rapidly. After setting their eyes on the destructive black lotus, they thought, if this door of space is prepared for empty divine realm, the destructive black lotus must be prepared for dark world. What about the divine mountain? Could it be that all of these are not a coincidence, but the will of man? The hearts of the onlookers pounded like a drum as they glanced at the sky. If this were a will of man, it would mean that it was the will of the heavenly path. Who was the embodiment of the heavenly path? They all felt that the heavenly path was a chess game where all living things were pawns. In ancient times, the 8 legions under the command of the heavenly path ruled the order of the world. Would the heavenly path edify the 8 legions this time? Was that why divine items had descended from the sky? Did the heavenly path belong to heavenly emperor realm? Could it be that the will of the heavenly emperor did not disappear? The world was divided into the 7 realms at that time. If one were to include original realm, it would be 8 realms in total. In other words, the heavenly path might drop 7 or even 8 divine items from the sky. If they were to manifest once every 3 years, it would take 18 or 21 years. The destructive black lotus undoubtedly belonged to dark world. Likewise, the door of space was clearly a gift to empty divine realm. At that time, the cultivators of empty divine realm moved toward the door of space and encircled it. Although they could not get hold of it, yet the divine power of the law of space that it emanated could help them cultivate. Nonetheless, some other cultivators went near it anyways. After all, the cultivators of empty divine realm were not the only ones who cultivated in the way of space. Many cultivators from different parts of the world were proficient in the power of the great path of space. Greetings. Since each realm will have its divine item, we, people of empty divine realm, will claim ownership of the door of space. Hence, we will not participate in the scramble for other divine items, said Dugawushya, a cultivator of empty divine realm. He was surrounded by an entourage of powerful cultivators from Empty Mountain. Although these divine items were compatible with cultivators from certain realms, they could also help people from all parts of the world gain benefits in their cultivation. Hence, they could not conquer more than one divine item for themselves. So, they would miss the chance to claim one of them as their own. The cultivators from other realms, most likely, would not be willing to tussle with each other. After all, divine items that were suitable for them might appear later. Many cultivators were ready for action, but no one tried to seize it in the end. Just like how they gave up the destructive black lotus, they could do the same by giving away the door of space to the empty divine realm. No matter what, they would take one of the divine items for themselves. However, who had the ownership over the divine mountain? Cultivators from all over the world surrounded the divine mountain in the 99 heavens and cultivated. No one took it for themselves yet. Yi Futian's silhouette remained in his inner world and watched the changes within it while meditating on the heavenly path. He had gained much enlightenment in the past 6 years. He was the first to sense the divine power when the heavenly path had dropped the black lotus, divine mountain, and door of space. The black lotus represented the law of destruction. The divine mountain represented strength and stability. The door of space represented the law of space. The stars surrounded Yi Futian's inner world. Feeling slightly fluttery, he stretched his hand in the air, trying to catch something. At once, a star flew in his direction rapidly. It gradually became smaller until it was the size of a speck that hovered around his palm. A flower could contain an entire world. A leaf could be a miniature Bodhi tree, Yi Futian murmured. There were many continents in the original realm, including the Ziwei segmentum. It was filled with stars that dispersed across the sky. The evolution of the stars are endless worlds, Yi Futian mumbled. Every star in the firmament could hold a world. After swaying his palm, the tiny star was launched into the air. Immediately after, the entire atmosphere brimmed with innumerable particles that expanded continuously. In the end, all of them turned into stars while frightening noises could be heard. Each of the stars slowly turned into endless worlds. As a result, Yi Futian's inner world continued to grow in size as if it had just evolved. Every world within the stars seemed to transform into his original world, where heaven and earth were formed, including the power of yin and yang and the 5 elements. They continued to perfect the worlds within. With that, Yi Futian continued with his cultivation. A complete law of the heavenly path should be all-encompassing and packed with countless divine power of the law. Only then could the world of his heavenly path continue to evolve from micro-heavenly path into the complete macro-heavenly path. If he could finish this step, his world would be considered perfect. Then he could permit the cultivators of the world to meditate inside his world. The meditation and evolution were extremely time-consuming, causing Yi Futian to be lost track of time. Another 3 years had passed without his realization. At that time, Yi Futian was muttering something inside his world. 1 turned into 2, 2 split into 3, 3 spawned all things. He gained enlightenment on infinity. Infinity was boundless and immeasurable. There was a change in the sky on the outside. Following the emanation of a petrifying and sharp aura, the heavenly path materialized a divine sword that descended from the firmament. It seemed to have control over the rules in the world. Falling from the sky, it traversed the ether and the land. It pierced through the entire 99 heavens like the divine mountain. Sensing the spine-chilling divine power the divine sword released, all the cultivators raised avaricious smirks on their faces. Many influential individuals moved toward the divine sword to use it for their cultivation. The cultivators of the human realm were the fastest. In no time, they encircled and guarded the skies of the divine sword. Next, Dihao announced loudly, "We, the cultivators of human realm, will claim ownership of this sword." Their speculation might have turned out to be true. The heavenly path would give birth to a divine item once every 3 years. The crowds coveted the divine sword. After all, a myriad of cultivators in the world had been cultivating the way of the sword. For instance, West Emperor, Supreme Sword Lord, Yi Wuchen, and the other people of the Yi Imperial Palace were cultivators of the way of the sword. Therefore, the thought of getting close to the divine sword for cultivation ran through their minds when they caught sight of it. At that moment, Yi Futian opened his eyes as he knew the people's thinking. All those years of letting them meditate on the power of the law of the heavenly path improved their cultivation significantly. If they could grasp the purest form of the power of the law, it could benefit them considerably in their cultivation. "I do not agree," Yi Futian piped up. Upon hearing that, a concourse of onlookers turned to look at him. The cultivators of the human realm were scowling at him. Dihao's glare was especially disdainful. The divine items that had descended from the sky do not belong to anyone. Every cultivator has the right to do their cultivation with them. Yi Futian warned with a stern voice that no one would dare to question. The words that came out of Yi Futian's mouth were undoubtedly nonsensical. Although everyone understood his words, it all came down to their strength at the end of the day. The reason the Emperor-level forces thought they could claim ownership over those items was that they had the strength to back them up. After all, each of them represented the 7 realms. Yet, as Yi Futian was the one who said that it could not be considered nonsense. At that point, he already had the power to turn the tide of the situation according to his will. I don't care how you people allocate the divine items between yourselves, but the cultivators from Yi Imperial Palace shall cultivate at each place whenever they want. No one shall stop them from doing so. Yi Futian declared. Most of the people's pupils shrunk when they heard it. The strongest cultivators in the 7 realms were gathered in that place. Yet Yi Futian had the guts to utter such domineering words out of his mouth. A question was aroused in the minds of the onlookers as they recalled the event of him finishing off Vajra Realm Great Emperor. What is his current cultivation level? Go. Yi Futian ordered the cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace around him, disregarding all the people of the 7 realms. The West Emperor, Supreme Sword Lord, and the others moved forward. Both the West Emperor and Supreme Sword Lord cultivated in the way of the sword. So, the 2 of them walked toward the divine sword. Following that, Yi Wuqian, Gu Donglu, and the like approached the divine sword. On the other hand, Feng Xiyuan and the group headed in the Door of Space's direction, while Linglong led many people toward the divine mountain. The cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace acted according to Yi Futian's instruction. All of them wanted divine items related to their cultivation. To think that they would dare to do his bidding without hesitation just went to display their absolute trust toward him. Because of their deep faith in Yi Futian, they did what he had asked without delay, meditating with each divine item they deemed fit. On the vast land of the 99 heavens stood many cultivators from every part of the world, who were glaring at the cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace. Would anyone dare to lay a finger on them? If someone were to assault Yi Futian's subordinates to kill him, would he not be worried that they might be killed? Or did he believe that no one dared to do so? However, Yi Futian was the one who ended the life of Vajra Realm Great Emperor. Those who wished to lay a finger on the people of Yi Imperial Palace might need to reconsider carefully. Still, no one would dare risk killing one of them. At that moment, several cultivators from the direction of the human realm's crowd moved forward. All of them emanated blood-curdling divine power from within their bodies, giving off an aura that could hold a candle to the likes of Vajra Realm Great Emperor and the ancient emperors of the ancient god clan. So they've already survived the 3rd divine tribulation and reached the great emperor-to-be plane. Yi Futian remarked with a frown. He did not care much about the human realm previously, but it seemed like the powerful cultivators there were more than he had imagined. Human ancestor must have formed his micro-heavenly path, Yi Futian murmured to himself. Back then, the human realm extended an invitation to him, asking him to be absorbed into their side. In retrospect, they must have been trying to win over the powerful individuals from different parts of the world since the human ancestor had secured a path of the emperors. The ancient emperors of ancient god clan from Vajra realm walked on the path of the emperors after they headed to the human realm. Nevertheless, Yi Futian did not care much about it. He could kill Vajra Realm Great Emperor and held his ground against 4 great emperors to be back then. But his strength had already increased dramatically since then as his inner world continued to evolve. His strength would be increased each time he evolved, so his current might was equal to that of a great emperor to be. At the end of his evolution, he would become a true great emperor. Noticing Yi Futian's gaze, the cultivators from human realm surged their divine power like the gods in ancient times. They were all ancient emperors themselves. The aura they emanated and their supercilious air were matchless. One of them took a step forward. His divine power suppressed the location of Yi Futian from a far distance. However, he did not lay a finger on the people headed toward the divine sword. If they could not defeat Yi Futian, they were essentially signing their death warrant. If Yi Futian were a pushover, the cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace would not survive until that day. An intimidating authority of heaven filled the entire atmosphere of the 99 heavens. All the cultivators who stood between them retreated from the spot immediately, leaving the sight of a boundless land. It was as if they were the only two people who existed there. Great emperors to be, two of them. Many cultivators muttered while glancing at the ancient emperor from the human realm and Yi Futian. Please keep reading on MYB0XN 0VL D0T C0M. Back then, they had only heard about the story of Yi Futian killing Vajra, realm great emperor, and slaying Hautian the Great. Would they be able to witness the battle of ancient emperor this time? Boom! A loud rumble could be heard. The will of devastation filled up the atmosphere. Simultaneously, a purple light of destruction was generated between the ancient emperor and Yi Futian. A thunder attribute, divine power, Yi Futian mumbled after sensing the power. Innumerable light particles formed rays of purple light of destruction. Every particle was brimmed with peerless destructive power. This ancient emperor must have gained enlightenment on the purest form of the way of Thunder Source and assimilated it with his own divine power. Yi Futian could sense immense destructive power within each particle of the rays of divine light. Imagine every particle that contained Ju Tian, divine thunder. How terrifying would the explosive force be? One of them could easily penetrate the body of a powerful cultivator and disintegrate it completely. However, when the divine power touched Yi Futian, the divine light could not even pierce through his body's defense. Clang! Clang! Shrill noises could be heard when an apocalyptic purple divine light lit up the atmosphere while covering Yi Futian's body. The fabric of space over there was nearly torn by the divine power of destruction. Yet he stood in the middle of it without moving an inch. His body was no longer just flesh and blood. It had transformed into the great path. Cultivators on the sidelines could tell how petrifying the divine power of the ancient Tianshin of the human realm was. Their blood ran cold, even though that power was not directed at them. The destructive light penetrated the land beneath Yi Futian's feet and traversed the 99 heavens, did not improve the situation. Some unfortunate people were instantly reduced to ashes by the light beam. None of them even had the time to react. The divine power that penetrated the 99 heavens caught the attention of a myriad of crowds. They were aghast at the sight of it. At that time, countless powerful cultivators gathered in that realm and occupied every layer. The onlookers witnessed many people incinerated by the divine light beamed from above. Was it the battle of the gods? It's Yi Futian. Someone looked past the layers of space to the source of the beam of divine light and saw Yi Futian, who stood still at the middle of the attack of the divine power, not making a sound. "Old gods," Yi Futian piped up, "this is no longer your era." He spoke in an indifferent tone, yet his voice traveled to the ears of the crowds in the 99 heavens. They were taken aback by his remark, by which he called the ancient emperors old gods, and that this was no longer their era. In other words, he was saying they were beings out of time. Boom! The destructive divine light became increasingly fearsome. In a flash, the man held a long spear brimming with divine power in his hand. The sight of the destructive divine light illuminated the whole atmosphere was terrifying to behold. Shooting Yi Futian a glare, he launched the spear downward, and it broke through the void while the destructive divine light lit up the sky. Nonetheless, Yi Futian's reaction speed was exceedingly fast. He was so nimble that the onlookers could not catch up to him. His motions were faster than the speed of thoughts. Before anyone could react, they noticed Yi Futian raise his hand high and point toward the long spear. A seemingly simple pointing motion caused the entire atmosphere to tremble. Then divine light could be seen firing at the other party's divine light, putting out the latter upon impact and launching toward the destructive spear. Bang! Following a loud bang, the massive spear broke into pieces. The powerful attack passed through the destroyed spear and hit the divine body of the ancient emperor. The ancient emperor could hear a deep groan as he felt like his divine frame was about to shatter. In the next moment, he spat blood out of his mouth. The sight of it caused the hearts of the onlookers in the 99 heavens to pound like crazy. They were looking at the happening above the sky intensely. A flick of his finger could spill the blood of a god. Just how powerful had Yi Futian become? He must have reached the tier of great emperor-to-be. At that time, they recounted Yi Futian calling the ancient emperor old god earlier. In other words, he was saying that the era of the ancient times' heavenly path had already passed. Even if the old gods returned, it was no longer their time to shine. Would Yi Futian and his crazy powerful bunch of cultivators start a brand new epoch? Many human realm cultivators turned their eyes to the injured ancient Tianshan. They were wondering what kind of power was stored within the flick of Yi Futian's finger. What kind of divine power was that? Someone asked through telepathy. They were taken aback by the explosive force of the flick of Yi Futian's finger. They knew the strength of their comrade, yet he could not handle the attack. I'm not sure. The divine power within the flick of his finger was substantial and profound, like the divine mountain. Some part of it felt like the divine power of the stars. He must have packed the divine power of the stars into that flick, the ancient Tianshan answered, much to the other cultivators' surprise. As fellow great emperors-to-be, your cultivation level should technically be the same, even if you were a path slayer. We've met a handful of the divine power of the stars users before. By right, you should have been able to destroy it with your divine power. Even if you could not shatter it, you should have ended up like that. A person remarked telepathically in confusion. Every cultivator in this world gained their divine power through enlightenment, but there were consistent patterns. Many similar abilities could be categorized as a type of divine power. The divine power of the stars was one of them, so it was not a rare ability. Unless it was the ultimate form of the divine power of the stars, someone commented. The pupils of the human realm cultivators shrunk after hearing that. The final form of the divine power of the stars' evolution was the divine power of the world. If Yi Futian gained the divine power of the world through his meditation, his strength among the great emperors would be top tier after reaching that plane of cultivation. There were ranks between divine powers. We should focus on our cultivation so that we would reach the perfection plane the soonest possible, one of them said. Everyone nodded in agreement. To prevent the problems from getting out of hand, they continued with their cultivation. Once they perfected their great path, they would become a bona fide great emperor. If they could reach that tier before Yi Futian, they could wipe the floor with him, even if he gained the divine power of the world. With that, the cultivators of human realm acquiesced that the cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace would cultivate around the area of the divine sword and gain enlightenment on the divine power within it. Likewise, no one stopped the cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace from entering the other areas of the divine items. Although the people of Empty Divine Realm felt a little dissatisfied, they were not overly opposing as they both had common enemies. The cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace who were proficient in the power of the great path of space got near to the divine door of space and meditated on the will of the great path of the law of space. At that time, the cultivators around the world thought Yi Imperial Palace was the only force without a great emperor. Yet, its cultivators dare occupy the cultivation resources of all the other forces. This is the only thing none of the other emperor-level forces can pull off. All things considered, it was all due to Yi Futian's might. As a person who became a great emperor-to-be, no one could hold a candle to him apart from the 6 great emperors. Although all the strongest individuals in the world, including many ancient emperor cultivators, were gathered at that place. Only a handful of them could hold their own in a battle with him, except if there were extremely powerful cultivators lurking in the dark. Countless cultivators on the ground of the 99 heavens saw the might of the flicker and were stunned by it. Just how powerful had Yi Futian become? Back then, the 5 great emperors of the 5 ancient god clans purged countless cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace. At that time, Yi Futian narrowly escaped death. But who would have thought that the incident would be the cause of his invincibility currently? If the 5 ancient emperors could foresee this outcome, they would have used other methods to finish him off. They would not have looked at him condescendingly and given him time to take a break and eventually survived the third tribulation. Would they finally regret their actions back then? The world cultivation once revered the demigod list, but near-deity cultivators were no longer considered influential in the current world. The discovery of the ruins of the gods caused the birth of countless near-deity cultivators. The great emperors of ancient times continuously showed up around as well. At that point, people must be focused on the great emperor-to-be list, and perhaps the great emperor list shortly. Everyone had the hunch that the prophecy of Buddha of destiny would come true. The age of the gods would take place in no time. The time when the ruins of the gods appeared was the catalyst. It was a historic moment. Will the strength of Yi Futian threaten Donghuang the Great? Some of the crowd recounted the remaining duration of Donghuang the Great's fate of the emperor, which only had around 20 years left. Everyone believed that the age of the gods would take place. But even if Yi Futian became a great emperor, could he end Donghuang the Great's fate of the emperor? Donghuang the Great had been a great emperor for almost 500 years. This talented genius was already an extremely powerful cultivator back then. No one knew the extent of his current strength. Many thoughts ran through the minds of the cultivators of divine prefecture. Most of them were glaring at Yi Futian hostile looks, while scowling at the cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace in displeasure. A significant number of divine prefecture's cultivators were meditating around the divine mountain to gain enlightenment on its power. Donghuang Diyuan was there as well. How arrogant of him to behave like that when he is just a great emperor-to-be. Did he forget that the existence of the 6 great emperors? Someone criticized. The owner of the voice was Diyu. He was a powerful near-deity cultivator at that time. As the direct disciple of Donghuang the Great, his talent was extraordinary. Even though he had reached near-deity plane, he was still no match for Yi Futian. Things would get ugly if you push your luck too much. He hasn't even become a great emperor. Did he think that he could already stand at the pinnacle of the cultivation world? A person from divine prefecture retorted. Although they could not handle Yi Futian, currently they did not like his arrogance. He was still alive because the 6 great emperors did not lay a finger on him. Yi Futian turned his eyes on Diyu, who was talking. With a thought, his and the other people's faces turned pale, and they immediately fell from the sky as an invisible divine power pressed them down. Although they unleashed the aura of the great path from their bodies, they could not stop themselves from descending. Beads of sweat broke out on their foreheads while they plummeted downward. At the very least, I don't dare to talk big in front of the 6 great emperors. You 2 are more arrogant than I am, Yi Futian retorted. At once, both of them felt a quiver in their bodies. Then they grunted as the color drained from their faces. All the cultivators understood Yi Futian's sarcasm toward the 2 of them. The difference between their strength and the former was like the gap of the man's might and the 6 great emperors. Therefore, Diyu and the other person were running their mouths before him was pretty ridiculous. Zip your lips and focus on your cultivation first before you come and talk to me, Yi Futian remarked. With that, he ignored the rest of them and closed his eyes to continue his meditation. He knew better than anyone else about his current circumstance. If he took a step forward, he would achieve greater heights. But if he fell back, things might turn ugly for him. So it all came down to the 6 great emperors' attitude. Devil World, Empty Divine Realm, and Dark World had the intention to help him fight Dong Huang the Great. Meanwhile, the human ancestor and the Lord of all Buddhas' thoughts remained unknown. The 6 great emperors' attitude would decide his fate. Thus, he would not leave Heavenly Emperor Realm if he did not reach the Great Emperor Plane this time. Since the heavenly path manifested in this realm, he might as well stay here and meditate on it with his subordinates. His current focus was to perfect his micro-heavenly path, so that when he faced Dong Huang the Great again, he could stand a chance in the battle with the latter. At that moment, he was uncertain about the magnitude of the 6 great emperors' power. He could only gauge their strength after becoming a great emperor and fighting them. Should he become a great emperor through path-slaying cultivation, his strength would be comparable to that of Dong Huang the Great. Even though the cultivators of the divine prefecture were furious after hearing Yi Futian's remarks, they remained calm. After all, strength was everything in this world. Yi Futian could suppress them just with his thoughts alone, and they could not even budge an inch. So, they were not qualified to challenge him. With that, they continued their meditation to improve their cultivation level. Only after reaching the great Emperor-to-be plane could they stand a chance to regain their dignity. Dong Huang Diwen turned to look at Yi Futian, still silent. The great Emperor-to-be cultivators behind her were eager for a battle with Yi Futian to see how powerful the latter was, the one who reached their level through path-slaying cultivation. The manifestation of the heavenly path will bring about the age of the gods. Never had I ever expected to see the cultivators of the divine prefecture remain snobbish in the face of the changing of the world. A cultivator of Dark Court commented, "Within this heavenly path, a great emperor equal in strength and status with the current 6 great emperors shall be born." The remark indicated that Yi Futian would be equal to the 6 great emperors if he became a great emperor within this heavenly path. In other words, he would not pale in comparison to Dong Huang the Great of the divine prefecture. When that happened, the cultivators under Dong Huang the Great's umbrella would have no right to converse with him. While this comment might sound like a compliment that Yi Futian would become a great emperor, it had a slight hint of something sinister. It could also remind Yi Futian and Dong Huang imperial palace people that the former could become a great emperor here. Yi Futian remained indifferent. Still, he could read the thoughts of Dark World's cultivators. Although he had connections with the people of the Dark Court, he knew for sure that the others were siding with him for their benefit, apart from Qingyao. They stood on the same side because they had a common enemy, but each of them had their own agenda. Both forces of the Dark World and the Empty Divine Realm must be in a dilemma. On one side, they wanted Yi Futian to deal with Dong Huang Imperial Palace. Yet, he would be difficult for them to control if he became too powerful. But at that point, none of them could hold a candle to him. After hearing those words, many cultivators of Dong Huang Imperial Palace furrowed their brows. Would a great emperor be born within this heavenly path? What would happen if Yi Futian continued his cultivation here and eventually reached the great emperor plane? Such an outcome was not easy for them to swallow. Countless people lifted their heads and gazed at the sky in contemplation. Although they were unwilling to see it happen, they could do nothing to stop it from playing out. Should they lay their fingers on Yi Futian? But they knew they could not do that. Just a little while ago, a few cultivators of the human realm had already tried it. Yi Futian paid no heed to all the things that happened and focused solely on his cultivation. As long as he was present, the safety of Yi Imperial Palace's cultivators was guaranteed. They could enter the areas of every divine item for their cultivation. Meanwhile, he continued to meditate on his micro-heavenly path. The most important thing at the moment was for him to perfect his micro-heavenly path. The world inside Yi Futian had developed beyond the standard of a normal world. It had become a universe with endless realms and worlds. All the worlds inside the universe were slowly perfecting themselves. Simultaneously, his micro-heavenly path governed all the laws and orders of the universe. At that time, Futian suddenly recalled the world of Buddhism. That world was situated on top of the Bodhi tree, and the tree must be the foundation of the great path of the world of Buddhism. As the thought crossed his mind, he wondered if the Buddha had already perfected his micro-heavenly path. Buddhism was a class of its own, so the idea was not too far-fetched. If one proved their path through Bodhi, they could create a Western heaven world of Buddhism. Once he completed his micro-heavenly path and reached the Great Emperor Plane, the cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace and Ziwei Segmentum could enter his world for meditation. In a nutshell, he would be the embodiment of the heavenly path and the world. It could all happen with a thought. Yi Futian suddenly appeared in the boundless world. With a thought, a chaotic domain manifested within the world and sealed it from the outside. In some places, dimensional turbulence, brimmed with space-time ripping path, began to show up. Most of the law of great paths had many usages. The law of the great path of space was one of them. Yi Futian was trying to perfect the law of space of his micro-heavenly path at that time. As time passed, the cultivators outside were slowly improving and transforming, while Yi Futian continued his cultivation. Many ancient emperor cultivators showed up one after another continuously. They went through the divine tribulation and reached the great emperor-to-be plane. It was a path that they had once gone through, but had to redo. Furthermore, they were taken aback by the similarities between the current heavenly path and ancient times. They were wondering if this was the rebirth of the ancient heavenly path. Could it be that heavenly imperial palace collected and kept a small part of the heavenly path after its collapse? It's about time. At that moment, the crowd looked up at the sky and anticipated the event that was about to happen. The end of the 3-year gap was already around the corner. 3 years ago, a divine sword had descended from the sky. What would the following divine item be this time? Countless people were waiting in anticipation. Apart from them, a myriad of people on the ground beneath the 99 heavens was waiting for the manifestation of the next divine item as well. Ever since the divine items penetrated the 99 heavens, they brought forth fortune and favor for everyone. They had helped many people in their cultivation. Their only hope was that the next divine item would not be monopolized by one of the forces. If the heavenly path had a will of its own, which of the remaining realms would it unleash the divine item for? Many people speculated in their minds. Could it be the devil world, the divine prefecture, or the heavenly realm? Was the divine sword prepared for human realm? No one knew the will of the heavenly path. As it went on, an extraordinary aura emanated from the sky above. A terrifying dark divine light beamed as the crowds raised their heads to glance at the firmament. All of them could sense the might of the authority of heaven. Right then, a black divine item appeared before the eyes of the crowds. It was packed with a peerless will of darkness while it slowly solidified. "It's a divine battle axe," someone exclaimed as the black divine item showed up. A gigantic divine battle axe descended from the sky while unleashing a domineering and sharp aura. Immediately, the people beneath the divine battle axe retreated from the spot. The spine-chilling aura caused many cultivators to open their eyes and stare at the massive black divine battle axe that split open the 99 heavens and penetrated through it. Even Yi Futian opened his eyes after sensing the aura of the divine item. His pupils shrunk as he peered at the black divine battle axe and thought, this one must be prepared for the devil world. Their speculation could very well turn out to be true. Could it be that the heavenly path wished to gift each realm a divine item? Should that be the case, what was the purpose of the heavenly path then? Did the heavenly path intend to govern the rule and order of this world? The remnants of Devil Imperial Palace were staring at the black divine battle axe as if it was meant for them. the battle of great emperors to be. Now that the divine battle axe was before their eyes, they would never walk away without trying to scramble for it. A few cultivators stepped forward simultaneously on several locations as they unleashed their divine power that pressurized the ground from the sky. In a blink, the might of Tiantian descended and covered the place where Yi Futian was. Every cultivator at the scene stared at the happening and thought, is there going to be a battle between emperors to be? Earlier on, Yi Futian had displayed his overpowering strength by inflicting significant damage to an emperor to be with just a flick of his finger. Despite that, a few emperors to be fired attacks at Yi Futian to seize their chance to cultivate on it. Yi Futian immediately got up and stepped into the void. At once, a blood-curdling divine power pressed on his body from the firmament. Yet it could not break through his defense at all. The area around Yi Futian seemed to turn into his impenetrable domain. What a powerful defense! The pupils of the onlookers shrunk as they watched Yi Futian in action. Both his offense and defense were overwhelmingly strong. Even the combined attacks of the emperors to be could not take him down. It's a battle of emperors to be. The cultivators of Heavenly Realm were gathered at Heavenly Palace, which was above the sky. Ji Wudao looked down from there with an intrigued look. According to the prophecy, the battle of the emperors to be might be the prologue of the Age of the Gods. Someday in the future, there will be a battle between great emperors. This clash might very well be the foreshadowing of the war of the future great emperors, so he was looking forward to it. A huge area in the sky of the 99 heavens was deserted. 3 great emperors to be could be seen standing at 3 different locations. When the gods' might was released, each of them unleashed an overwhelming aura that all the cultivators in the 99 heavens could feel. They were all beings who walked on the path of the emperors were emperors to be. Yi Futian stood still on the ground beneath the 3 of them, his white hair flying in the wind. He was emanating a peerless spirit as if he was unbeatable in this world. By himself, he could defeat the myriad of cultivators. Many divine swords of devastation emerged in the sky above. All of them were black. They destroyed everything on their path wherever they went. Countless sword chi currents created with divine power of devastation flowed toward Yi Futian. When they passed through the void, everything turned into a desolate wasteland. When the currents gusted toward him, everything seemed to turn still. Then he raised his head to look at the sky. Immediately, the divine power of Yin froze the entire dimension. Following that, the divine power of Yang was unleashed. Both the powers of Yin and Yang merged and canceled out the divine power of devastation. Swoosh! A gigantic black divine sword descended from the firmament and darkened the entire sky, turning the atmosphere dark and bleak. Everything in this dimension would be erased. The will of desolation descended below the 99 heavens, causing the crowds to flee from it. None of them dared to get near it for fear that it would be the end of them. Boom! The divine sword of devastation pierced through the divine power of Yin and Yang and went toward Yi Futian's figure. Lifting his head, he glanced at it and stretched his head to grab it. To everyone's surprise, the divine sword of devastation did not move his palm at all. The onlookers could not help but draw a cold breath at the sight of it as they stared at Yi Futian's hand. Was the attack of emperors to be that feeble to him? Those individuals were ancient emperors. Now that they had started their path of the emperors, they must have been very powerful. After all, they already had experience in cultivation a long time ago. Yi Futian stood on the spot gallantly like a god. A terrifying booming noise could be heard when he gripped his hand. At once, the divine sword of devastation in his hand was broken in pieces and slowly disappeared into thin air. The emperor-to-be, who saw it, felt resigned. Immediately, he made the sky even darker with a thought as he unleashed more divine power of devastation. Right then, an even more petrifying divine sword of devastation descended from the sky, aiming at Yi Futian. Initially, the other two emperors-to-be were spectating on the sidelines, but after witnessing Yi Futian's strength, they knew for a fact that he would wipe the floor with them. One of them formed numerous, massive golden ancient bells in the sky with a thought. Ripples of sound waves came from the ancient bells and filled the atmosphere with their sound. Countless cultivators' blood froze upon hearing that. Even the stronger ones could hardly bear with the noise. The sonic blast brimmed with divine power of sound was aimed at Yi Futian's body. It could quickly destroy the spiritual soul of a cultivator, a domineering power one never wanted to come across. The combination of the physical and spiritual soul attacks doubled the offensive force. When facing an attack of this level, most cultivators would be easily overwhelmed. The attacks of two different natures were fatal upon impact. Furthermore, the third emperor-to-be did not make his move yet. In a flash, he turned himself into a colossal ancient god and threw his fists out. It was full of intimidating spirit and could break the fabric of space itself. It was an imposing sight to behold. The attacks of the three emperors-to-be covered the sky, and the location where Yi Futian stood was flooded with the divine power of destruction. Following the breaking out of God's might, most cultivators in 99 heavens could not bear it anymore and were decimated on the spot. Some of their spiritual souls were destroyed, while others had their physical bodies smashed to smithereens. Within the space of the brutal divine power, Yi Futian's silhouette gradually became larger and eventually turning into a god. Raising his head, he looked at the sky, and the divine lights of sun and moon were shot out of his eyes. At the same time, he threw his hand toward the sky. When the palm of God was hurled toward the void, the entire sky exploded. The divine sword of destruction, the intimidating golden divine fists, and the divine bell, brimming with the divine power of sound, were all shattered. It did not matter how oppressive the opponent's attacks were. In the end, he would still disintegrate them all with his palm. The spine-chilling giant palm kept moving up until it reached the three of them. Colors drained from their faces, and they leaped higher into the sky. However, Yi Futian fired the divine power of Yin from his eyes to slow them down. They moved in slow motion as if the surrounding space was frozen. A mere blink was long enough for the attack to reach them. At once, the frightening giant palm of Tiantian hit the three emperors-to-be indiscriminately. 3 blasts shook the atmosphere. It sounded as if the fabric of space and time would be torn open at any time. Following that, the 3 of them were sent flying and puking up blood. Their bodies were fatally injured, and the sky was filled with their blood. I've already said it before, times have changed. This era does not belong to you anymore, Yi Futian declared. His voice resounded through the atmosphere of the 99 heavens. Peering at the sky, he went on, "The divine battle axe belongs to Devil World. Period. If there's anyone who wishes to challenge me, I will not go easy on you next time." He had already pulled his punches, as he was still wary of the 6 great emperors. Therefore, he would not go too overboard. All in all, the most important for him was to complete his path of the emperors and reach the great emperor plane. Only through that could he stand a chance in a fight with the 6 great emperors. At that moment, the 99 heavens turned into dead silence after everyone caught sight of the happening. A few years had passed since the last time Yi Futian displayed his strength, and he became even more powerful. To think that he could injure 3 great emperors-to-be with a single attack. How could the ancient cultivators hope to stand against him? His attack was domineering and indestructible. The cultivators beneath the 99 heavens were taken aback by the might of Yi Futian. If he could fatally injure 3 emperors-to-be with one attack, he could be considered unbeatable after ruling out the 6 great emperors. Was there anyone who could stand in his way in the 99 heavens? With his words alone, the owner of the divine battle axe was declared. The remaining emperors-to-be were affected by it the most. After all, They had been waiting for the longest time for a chance to make their comeback. Yet a cultivator with monstrous strength emerged out of nowhere before they could even display their power. This man suppressed all the ancient emperors and told them that times had changed and that their era was long over. Was the era really changed? In retrospect, times had never changed. However, an unbelievably powerful cultivator would appear in every era. During ancient times, a group of individuals defied the world and opposed the heavens with their matchless strength. Now that a path of the emperors was discovered in this era, distinguished individuals would appear sooner or later. They were just unlucky to meet with one of those mighty figures. Apart from the great emperors, was there anyone who could defeat Yi Futian? Similar thoughts ran through the minds of many onlookers. Yi Futian could injure 3 emperors-to-be with only one attack, so he had the right to be called undefeatable, excluding an attack by the great emperors. No one could imagine him being defeated if the opponent was not one of the great emperors. If the ancient emperors who became emperors-to-be could not take Yi Futian down, what about the once matchless cultivators with unbelievable strength? Could those individuals get the better of him? Perhaps they might need to become an emperor-to-be through path-slaying cultivation or gain enlightenment on some extraordinary divine power of the law first. Yi Futian's divine power was conspicuously more powerful than the 3 he easily defeated. His strength was in a different league. Devil World had maintained a good rapport with Yi Futian. Devil Imperial Palace has snagged a good bargain this time. Countless people thought to themselves, Devil World might be a powerful force, but the divine battle axe of creation was not a common item. It might be the divine power of the law during creation days. If one could grasp its power, their strength would be greatly increased. With that in mind, a few people of different realms stepped forward to stop the Devil World from getting their wish granted. If it weren't for Yi Futian's interference, it would not be easy for Devil World to get this divine item. They would need to scramble for it while shedding their blood. Now that Yi Futian had displayed his near-omnipotent strength and defeated 3 emperors-to-be without breaking a sweat, who would still dare to fight for it? Please keep reading on MYB0XN 0VL D0T C0M. Suddenly, everyone stopped fighting for the right to meditate on the divine battle axe of creation. They could only feel its power from afar. But if Devil Imperial Palace set up a barrier around the divine item, they would be kept out altogether. Many cultivators of Devil Imperial Palace shot Yi Futian a glance. After knowing the latter's relationship with Yu Sheng, many of them were not particularly fond of him. Many of them had a bad impression of him since they thought he was under the care of Devil Imperial Palace. Yet everything had changed at this point. Yi Futian had won them the ownership of the divine item with his overwhelming strength. The people of Devil World admired powerful figures. As expected of Yu Sheng's best friend, Yi Futian, many acknowledged him. What would happen if the 2 of them formed an alliance in the future? It was something they didn't dare to imagine. Their alliance might be grander than the one between Dong Huang the Great and Emperor Yi Qing. Yi Futian walked toward the divine battle axe of creation and came to a halt beside Yu Sheng. Then he began sensing the sharp aura overflowing from within. It was the divine power of creation manifested at the birth of the heavenly path. Yu Sheng, this divine battle axe really suits you. Yi Futian uttered. Technically, this divine battle axe was not a divine arm. It was formed through the power of the law of the heavenly path, brimmed with the will of creation, and took the form of a divine battle axe. This weapon was somewhat similar to the divine ruler that sealed the demonic lord earlier. It was the embodiment of the law of the heavenly path, one capable of sealing even the demonic lord from ancient times. I don't think it's that easy, Yu Sheng answered while staring at the divine battle axe of creation. Still, this weapon was suitable for him, though there was no saying if he could split open the devil abyss after completing the supreme demonic way. He had been chosen as the successor to the Devil Emperor, so the secrets of Devil Abyss had been revealed to him. The artifact from ancient times was more complicated than he had imagined. The Devil Abyss was created during the birth of the Heavenly Path. "Give it a try," Yi Futian encouraged with a smile. Yu Xing nodded. With their shoulders next to each other, they meditated on the divine power of the law within the divine battle axe. Yi Futian wondered what sort of divine power could be born with the power of the law of the Heavenly Path. Closing his eyes, he hovered his superconscious around the divine battle axe of creation and slowly entered the realm of the will of the divine battle axe. After a while, he came to a world of chaotic space. Inside that space, he noticed an enormous divine battle axe that split the space open, creating a frightening-looking crack and separating the sky from the earth. He was touched by the realm of the will. To his surprise, the divine power of creation was formed by merging different kinds of divine power of the law. Together, the domineering will, the peerless power, and extreme sharpness forged the divine power of creation. Perhaps hardly anyone could replicate this divine power, save for anybody like him. Soon, the divine light started to flow around Yi Futian's body. Inside his inner world, a silhouette was standing in the boundless space while peering at the countless worlds of this universe. Simultaneously, it also sensed the flow of different types of divine power of the law. Several illusions manifested around his body, looking like incorporeal figures. They were all his phantoms. All of them were holding a divine battle axe and separating the sky from the earth, but they were all slightly inferior. Some of the divine powers were easier to replicate, while the others were harder. For instance, creating the divine power of the 5 elements was like child's play for him since he was born at the creation of this universe. He had cultivated many powers in the past and had turned them into parts of the law of his heavenly path to run this universe. However, specific non-existent divine power of the law, like the divine power of creation, could not be replicated easily. Usually, these extremely rare and powerful divine powers had manifested through coincidence. Yi Futian could not get it right even after meditating on it for a long time. In the end, he gave up. The divine power of creation was born at the birth of the heavenly path. So, there must be some specific requirements to replicate it. Nevertheless, he could recreate other divine powers inside his inner world. With a thought, his surroundings were suddenly filled with endless phantoms created by him. Those phantoms held a sharp sword in their hands and began cultivating on the way of the sword. At once, countless sword silhouettes were flying around as sword chi dominated the entire space. Yi Futian's consciousness turned into innumerable way of the sword. Each one was unique to the other. Divine power and divine technique were different sides of the same coin. Cultivators usually gain enlightenment on a divine power and then create a divine technique. In essence, a divine technique was a superpower. If one were to reverse the meditation process, would it work? Countless phantoms were practicing swords ceaselessly. None of them were practicing the same technique. In other words, Yi Futian could train himself in different sword skills multiple times all at once. After training for a long time, those phantoms headed toward the small worlds while holding a divine sword in their hands. Clang! One of the phantoms thrust the sword forward and caused the world to tremble, creating many cracks in the process. Yet it did not bunch this world at all. After all, this world was created with the divine power of the world. In another world, Yi Futian's phantom thrust the sword forward, creating a hole in that world and penetrating it. The huge opening had many cracks around it, but the result was not too different from the first one. The attacks by different divine powers would show up at different locations. It went without saying that Yi Futian wanted to find out a divine power that could destroy the world created with the divine power of the world. Once it was demolished, it would mean that the created divine power was of a higher level than the divine power of the world. His experiment went on for a long time. During this period, Yi Futian's phantoms thrust the swords countless times. Countless phantoms of Yi Futian were attacking the small worlds inside the micro-heavenly paths world. Everything in this world was created by Yi Futian, so he could easily destroy them with just a thought. Yet his purpose was not to erase this world, but to create a divine power capable of demolishing the small worlds. Meanwhile, his original body was sitting in the void. Since he was the master of this heavenly path, his will would be the will of the heavenly path. Endless images of this place would fill up his mind. 100 million of them would flood his head every second and assimilate with his superconscious. As time passed, the visions in his mind became innumerable. The countless silhouettes in his mind were constantly improving, and the thrust of the divine swords gradually became stronger and scarier. Soon, the motions of the phantoms began to overlap with each other. Many of them started to maintain the same attack movement as if they had found some sort of useful lead. Just then, they carried on with a new round of experiment and refining. Similar scenes were reoccurring continuously. The sword techniques displayed by the endless phantoms were becoming more concise but stronger. It went on until the sword techniques were reduced to around a dozen of them. With the control of his thought, the myriad of phantoms followed the leadership of a dozen of them, whose offensive power was the strongest. The mirage within that domain played a subsidiary role to evolve according to the changes of the sword techniques. The small world was quivering more violently than before. Some of the attacks could create cracks in the small worlds, while the rest could cause their collapse. The further it went on, the harder it was to improve the sword technique. Hence, the time spent on refining became longer. About 2 years later, all the phantoms finally disappeared into thin air. Yi Futian sat in a lotus position while closing his eyes to cultivate. An intimidating will of the sword was surrounding his body the entire time. Suddenly, it turned into a storm and traveled across the land. There was only debris left across the areas the storm passed by. Although the development on the outside had stopped, a multitude of phantoms was still in the mind of Yi Futian. At that moment, he seemed to be submerged in a brilliant divine light. As his divine power continued to charge up, his aura gradually became stronger. At the same time, a divine power could be felt manifesting in the atmosphere. After some time, rays of divine light covered Yi Futian's body. Lifting his head, he saw a towering divine sword appear in the sky. This sword seemed to be formed with a divine power different from his usual ones. For one, it looked like an ancient divine sword that every heavenly law could not control. Boom! Following the descent of the divine sword, a ray of light shone and penetrated the boundless space and even the universe. It pierced through the chaotic dimension and instantly erased the worlds in its path. It was so powerful that even the divine power of space could not block it. Needless to say, the micro-worlds created with the divine power of the world were equally feeble. They did not escape their fate from being eradicated. That divine light spanned across the realm as though it was an eternal divine power. None of the dimensional power or small worlds could survive being blasted into nothingness. At that time, Yi Futian opened his eyes and looked in that direction. He was moved by his accomplishment and sighed. Now that he was steadily building his micro-heavenly path, he would one day become a bona fide heavenly path once he perfected his cultivation. There will be living beings cultivating in this universe in the future. Putting aside the divine power outside the scope of yin and yang and the 5 elements, could the divine power of the law within his divine sword be comparable to the divine power of creation? Would it be revered as the energy source used to create the universe? It might really happen. What should this divine power be called? This divine sword could be considered the ultimate evolution of the heaven-slaying divine sword. Perhaps this power should be called the heaven-slaying divine power, Yi Futian mumbled. Heaven-slaying sounded like an equal to creation. Tianju was the most basic form of sword technique created with a combination of the divine sword and the divine power. After years of meditation, it finally evolved into the ultimate form, which was also its strongest form. This was the final evolution of heaven slaying divine sword. Hence, the name of this sword would not be changed. It would remain the same. With heaven slaying divine power as its energy source, heaven slaying divine sword could wipe a world off the universe. How powerful would this attack become when he completed his micro-heavenly path? Yi Futian was very much looking forward to it. With that, he had an extra stratagem in his arsenal to stand against Dong Huang the Great. After Yi Futian finished his mediation, he opened his physical eyes and looked at the sky. At that time, everyone in the 99 heavens was still focused on their cultivation to improve themselves. Most people had huge improvements throughout the 2-year duration. He did not know how many new emperors-to-be were born since he concentrated on his cultivation. Plus, he did not observe the changes of the outside world at all. However, things were relatively peaceful in 99 heavens at that moment. There was no sign that a fight had taken place before. After all, no one dared to scramble for the divine battle axe, since Yi Futian had intimidated everyone previously. So, it was a no-brainer that no one had the nerve to disturb the cultivators of Yi Imperial Palace. While the cultivators were occupied by their meditation, many of them were waiting for the manifestation of the next divine item. Up until that moment, there were a total of 5 divine items, including the Black Lotus, the Divine Mountain, the Door of Space, the Divine Sword, and the Divine Battle Axe of Creation. There would be at least 2 more divine items waiting to be manifested in 7 realms. Since the heavenly path had gifted the divine battle axe of creation suitable for devil world cultivators, it would not be absurd for a divine item ideal for the world of Buddhism to manifest. Should that be the case, who is the actual beneficiary of the divine mountain? Was it divine prefecture or heavenly realm? Or perhaps original realm? No one knew the answer to that question. After all, it was the will of the heavenly path. There was not much time left. The end of another 3 years was already around the corner. In other words, the cultivators from all over the world had been staying in the 99 heavens for almost 15 years already. Nevertheless, all of them could hardly feel any difference since the people here were the strongest bunch in the world. So 15 years was pretty short for them. Other than their anticipation for the next divine item, everyone was curious about one thing. Who would be the next individual to join the lineup of the great emperors? At that moment, there were already a bunch of emperors-to-be in the 99 heavens. If one were to look at individual strength alone, Yi Futian would be the undisputed champion among the known emperors-to-be. Despite being the strongest, it didn't mean he would be the first one to reach the great emperor plane. At the end of the day, battle strength and cultivation level were 2 different things altogether. Yi Futian had always been known for his incredible battle prowess. Even in the face of an opponent with a higher cultivation level, he could still defeat them. Most of the emperors-to-be here were ancient emperors. If one were to compare cultivation experience, they would be the most knowledgeable. They had already known the way to become a great emperor. So, they only needed to submerge themselves in the heavenly law and wait until they had completed their paths and returned as the great emperors. On the other hand, Yi Futian was the best cultivator of the current age. As a cultivator who tried to reach the great emperor realm through path-slaying cultivation, his journey would be more challenging, and he would take a longer time to complete his path. With that in mind, most people excluded Yi Futian from the potential list of individuals who would be the first to become the next great emperor.